Right,
Just
right.
really,
That helped
really
get us a
strong sound. Yes, I thought it was something like that.
Well, he gets closer to this thing and he's realizing this doesn't look like a helicopter because it's oval shape. It's very similar shape to the craft that Zamora saw.
That's
It's
right.
sort of
Yeah.
and it's on 4 legs, I believe.
I don't know how many.
I saw one account that said it might have been 6 legs, but I've always thought it was 4 legs. So he sees what looks like children, and this is again like Zamora's case.
Yeah.
And like, was this your encounter when you were looking into this? Like, he was a little bit annoyed thinking that there's a bit of disconnect here, because if you think it's a helicopter landing, you're not going to think there's kids out there, but maybe it was early in the morning, maybe he hadn't had his coffee, I don't know what. He's thinking, he goes out there, but he very quickly realizes that these were not human beings, because they're short, they're like 4 feet tall or less.
Mm-hmm.
They're wearing a tight kind of clothing, greenish, grayish, large head. Let's move to
long arms.
This is Maurice Moss, by the way, and that's his lavender field.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, everyone describes him as a very genial, a very level-headed, a very good man. And he had actually been a resistance fighter during the Second World War. He had fought for French resistance. So Maurice Moss, yeah, he had a lot of respect from everyone who knew him. And there he is. This is another picture of him. He's got a nice face, very kind of open-looking man. This is a very artistic, creative rendering of the beings that he sees.
Yeah, so the beings were described as short, bald. They looked like they were 8 or 9 years old. As far as height, you know, they were very small. They had very large heads.
Right.
They had a hole instead of a mouth.
Right.
They had very large ears. That's something that's, you know, very different than what you usually hear for this type.
This rendition doesn't show large ears. This one shows a bit larger. This one I've seen many times. Someone kind of superimposed these scenes over a photograph of the lavender. And there's a couple of others that I have here. This is, I think, one of the better known ones. But yeah, they have no, these are like gray aliens. That's not quite accurate, like the image here, with larger ears.
Yeah, large ears is something that's very unusual about it. But still the large head, still the large eyes.
And the slanted eyes, definitely part of what he described. I mean, we're making a noise that was like a grumbling sound, whatever that means, or a gurgling sound. The impression that one gets in this case is that they were interested in the lavender. But, you know, any of the description, large, bald head, pale faces, all of that. So as he gets close enough to them, he sees that these are not kids. One of them aims like a tube, like right there, tube-like device at him. And he gets hit with some kind of beam or ray, which freezes him or paralyzes him. Mm-hmm. But he's not unconscious. Mm-hmm. And he's totally conscious during this.
Mm-hmm. And aware, so he's watching what's happening. Even though he's paralyzed, he's able to sort of watch and observe.
Right. So this paralysis lasts for about 20 minutes. And I think it was shortly after they paralyzed him that they just got back into the class and left. There was really nothing else that they did there. So this actually messed him up a little bit. Let's see if there's any other images here. Oh, that's ground traces. We'll get to that in a second.
Well, can I just interject here? Something that happened. The initial report, excuse me, he didn't even describe this. He reported that one was on the ground and one was in the craft, and that they eventually just flew away. Now, you know, he was a farmer. He wasn't used to all of the attention. When this came out, all sorts of press was after him, and he actually went away, stayed at a friend's place for a month and a half to get away from all of this. I mean, he didn't want the attention.
Right. He was just very quiet and humble.
Right. And then I guess he thought about it after a month and a half, and he came back, and he went to the police. And
didn't he go to the police immediately though?
No, what happened was when he first had this happen,
He went to the local tavern and local.
yes, well,
Right.
it was a very small town, so this
Yeah.
is where all of his friends were.
Right.
The owner of the bar, which Robert Fleischer was deeply investigating this, and so he was telling us the story.
Robert Fleischer is one of the leading UFO researchers in Germany, and he's a friend of ours, and he just happened to be looking into the balance.
Right. Yeah, and very recently as well. This was in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
So he said that Andre, who owned the bar or Café du Sport, it was also a very good friend of his. He told him that you don't tell anyone.
Right.
But it's this really small town, so he ends up telling everybody.
Right, of course.
And within a few hours, the police want to talk to him.
Right, and so before, this is all immediately, and they notice there's marks. There are ground traces.
So the police are super interested. They actually go and do the investigation on that day.
And they see there's 4 landing marks in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a deep hole.
Yeah.
And it was very moist, actually, which then hardened into something like concrete.
That's right.
Apparently, yeah. And whatever that was. Now, I was reading in one case that there was an analysis that said that the weight of the craft or whatever landed on it had to be quite significant, maybe 1.5 tons or even up to 2 tons. I don't know how they make these determinations, but someone decided that this was a very large or heavy craft.
I'm not sure either, but Robert did say that when they did the initial investigation, they did a police investigation, not a UFO investigation.
Right,
you know?
okay.
So they were looking at it through a specific lens, through specific eyes. But what I was going to say was the initial report that he gave was different, and then when he came back a month and a half later, he went back to the police
and gave more detail.
And gave more detail, and that's when he described that there were 2 beings standing here, like you're seeing here.
Yeah.
He said one was facing him, one was turned away. When the one facing him saw him, he nudged the other one. The one that was turned away turned around and had a wand in his hand.
Right.
And then paralyzed him. Seemed to paralyze him with that hand.
Right.
So,
and then that's when he did go into had more interviews after that with a number of people. One of the things one of the encounters in the interview that he had, someone showed him a drawing of the object that landed in Socorro. So investigators, after the fact, said, "Oh, did it look like this?" And they showed a picture of Lonnie Zamora's egg-shaped craft.
oh, right.
And Moss says, someone else has seen my UFO. So he saw this image of the Socorro craft and said it was really basically exactly the same. He was affected in terms of his sleep.
That's right.
He was always like a 5 hours a night
Well,
kind of
he
guy.
was a farmer, so he was used to getting up super early in the morning, 5:30, and he was unable to do this. He was changed since this happened. He said that he needed, between 10 and 12 hours a day.
For a while.
Yeah.
For at least
for months,
a couple of months.
following it. Yeah.
So it really something.
It's also about watches. Do you recall that?
No, describe that.
That he was having trouble with watches, that they would either go too fast, too slow, or they would stop, so he was just unable to wear them anymore. So this is sort of another thing that had happened.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. One other thing I just want to mention, Jacques Vallée, a number of years later, I think 14 years later, 1979, met with Maurice Moss. Moss lived, by the way, into his 90s. He was 94 when he finally passed away. Vallée was very impressed by Moss. He met him with 2 of his close friends. And he just pointed out, he said, Maurice Moss did not really want to give all the details to investigators or even to his own family, including the fact that he believed some kind of silent telepathic communication took place between himself and the being. So this is really something that affected him very powerfully. And just as he was saying, it took him a while to really, I agree, get into all of the details of what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But Vallée just said, I was very impressed by this. Throughout these discussions with Mr. Moss, I had the feeling that I was in the presence of a very intelligent man, capable of deep emotions and rational thought. He was also quite humble. And it's kind of a nice statement. It's says quite a bit about Jacques Vallée to have the that's about another person, but I think it says a lot about Maurice Mott. I was just noticing and looking into this case, there's a gentleman, Maurice Capot, who was a friend of Maurice Mott. And
A lifetime friend.
a lifetime friend. And this gentleman, I think, has been very hospitable to some of the German investigators who come in. Robert Fleischer is one of them, but he's not the only one. And so this gentleman gave an interview in French on YouTube, and he gives additional support to the whole Maurice Mott incident. This is in Valençon. That's the field. I believe that's the exact field where Mott lived. There's a highway right off the road now. But anyway, it's a very interesting case and definitely worth some investigation and definitely a strong case, I think.
I agree. Now, Robert told us a few extra things that were very interesting. He said that according to Maurice Chaufoul, that we're looking at here, who, by the way, was a retired politician.
We took him off, but
we did. We can put that on.
they're looking at us now.
Okay. He was able to ask Maurice, was this
Maurice
Maurice?
Mott, yeah.
He was able to ask Maurice Chaufoul if the other Maurice who this happened to was ever interested in UFOs. Was he ever interested in this? And he said absolutely not. He's a humble farmer. He wasn't interested in it before. He wasn't interested in it after. But there were some other things that came out that were kind of fascinating. That there were a couple of other witnesses in a lavender field nearby on the same day that reported this hissing sound as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Good.
And Maurice Chaufoul also mentioned that there was this possibility of missing time that some people were wondering about, because this happened around between 5:30 and 5:45 in the morning. He showed up at the Café du Sport about 3 hours later, and he just said he just stayed on the tractor and did his work. But they were all questioning. He just has this experience. His lavender is burned, by the way.
The plants were very adversely affected. I meant to mention that.
That's right.
And the closer to the center of where the object apparently landed, the worse it was.
And the soil became hardened very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So they're wondering, why would he work after this happened? How did he work? So a lot of them didn't really, people question this. What happened during those 3 hours?
And Mott didn't have a really good answer.
No,
Yeah.
he didn't. And then his 1 year later, apparently something happened to him again. He came in from the farm, and his wife had said that he looked super pale, like something was wrong. And apparently he told his wife they had come again. He said he told her that they hadn't landed or anything, but that he wished that she had seen what he had seen.
I'm glad you mentioned that again. And I remembered learning about that years ago. And, back in the 60s, it was definitely a no-no for a witness to claim that he saw or she saw a UFO twice.
Yeah.
Like, once was considered like a once-in-a-lifetime event. And to have it happen twice up close, people thought, oh, you're just looking for attention, you're crazy.
Right.
Now we think a little differently. What if he had been taken? And what if they wanted to come back a second time? Like, we will never really know, because his memory of both of those incidents might be incomplete, right?
Well, Robert Fleischer did say that Maurice said one day he would tell his grandson the whole story. And so when Robert told us that, I said, is his grandson still alive?
Would tell his
grandson the whole story and find that there was a lot more that he hadn't said. And I remember saying to Robert, is he alive? Has he said anything? And Robert said, unfortunately, no. Maurice died, and perhaps his grandson knows something and isn't saying anything, or maybe he doesn't know. So it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
I like all the extra details.
Yeah.
I find that an absolutely fascinating story. So
he's another witness, like Lonnie Zamora, where you really can't say anything against this man. Everyone who knew him liked him, respected him, trustworthy,
Yeah.
no nonsense,
Right.
nice, a really genuinely
Right.
good guy.
And he was not seeking the attention. You know, when
Right.
all the press came to him, he ran away. He didn't
Right.
want to be around it.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. And you know, I have to say, when we were just looking at that craft, Kirby craft, I was thinking tic-tac. UFO. I mean, it's just, you know, we keep hearing these days of the tic-tac.
We'll do a quick little share back again. And, yeah, well, it is
Right?
egg shaped. It is. It's actually a little smaller. The tic-tac UFO that we all hear about now from 2004 is about 40 feet long. This is shorter, but you got that kind of sleek, nice shape. So, yeah, actually.
So it's just kind of interesting.
So let's move on to the next case. We've got 2 to go here. We're halfway through. We're going to go to Australia now. And this is the Westall case. I want to share the screen again. You can see right what we're talking about. Right by Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne?
I don't quite say it the too Aussie way. It's true.
I spent a long time there.
Melbourne is how they like to say it. I'm sure I'm not getting it quite right. Love the Aussies. Some of the nicest, those just genuine people. Like
Most hospitable, wonderful people.
If you can't get along with anyone from Australia, then there's something wrong with it. Like, seriously. So anyway, this is where the Westall School was, just outside Melbourne in a place called Clayton. And this is now April 6th, 1956. So about a year, almost a year after the Maurice Moss incident in France. So this is an incredible case because you've got about 200 students and teachers who see an object. Here's a nice picture. Look at these kids. Like, this is some of the kids in the school. Nothing on this case. The Australian military given nothing on this. And you've got these ridiculous explanations like weather balloon. I'm like, are you serious? We'll get to all of that. So the kids, this is one drawing. There's a couple of really good artist renditions of this. Basically, the kids have been out. It was like a recess or a sporting event, and they're heading back. I think they were playing cricket.
This is actually 11 in the morning, and it was right before recess. So because of all these different grades, a lot of them were doing different things. Some of them were in class, and some of them were out on the field, you know, playing cricket, like I assume like a gym class kind of thing. So
yeah,
it happened right before recess, and that's why you get these different accounts. Some of them were already outside. Some of them were inside the building.
Right, and so they look up, and it's like, there's a flying saucer. But then years later, this is what they're all saying. Yeah, we all looked up and we saw, like, this was a flying saucer. And a lot of these witnesses are like, this was not a weather balloon. I'm adamant this is not a balloon. It's not any aircraft. Nothing conventional. One witness, this is typical because it was a round silver disc. Seemed to be very low over the school. And I remember kids screaming and running. Some were running toward it and some were running inside. And there were teachers inside and outside who also saw this thing. So now, did you read this whole thing? There's the initial disc, whatever this thing was seen, and then witnesses saw a collection of smaller objects circling around it or following it, about 5 of them.
Some people describe it as sort of one main saucer and then these 5 smaller craft that were buzzing around it. Buzzing it.
Right.
That's how I heard it described over and over.
This image, this drawing has like birds, but this isn't really quite what we're talking about here. Let me move on to the next image. And some witnesses saw multiple objects, didn't they?
That's right. Some of them saw 3 craft.
Right.
Some of them said they saw 1 craft. But again, I think this is because people were in different areas. I mean, there could be other reasons too, but there are different accounts. And I think that's what you expect when you get a lot of people reporting it, and some are looking out of windows, and some are, you know.
So what we do know what happened, I don't know what happened to the 5 objects that were around it. They seem to be gone after a brief period of time, it seems to me. So at least one object, maybe more than one object, goes toward, and they have a nearby area that's all called the Grange, or like pasture, and some of the kids ran off after at least one of these objects that either landed or appeared to land. let's see what images I have here. And these are some descriptions that people have given of the object. There was one girl named
That
Tanya.
was drawn by a witness, yeah.
You want to talk about Tanya?
Yeah, well, Tanya was apparently the first to reach the site. There
Right.
was there were a group of 3 girls, as I understand it, that ran out. Now, I was listening to the account of one of them.
Is that Jacqueline?
This was actually Carrie Peck.
Okay.
Okay, so she runs out with Tanya and another girl. The other 2 girls get ahead of her, and she said Tanya was, one of them was hysterical and one of them fainted. So it was Tanya who was hysterical. Now, there was another girl there named, I think it was Jackie.
Yeah.
And she wasn't quite at this area yet. She said Tanya came running out of the Grange towards her, screaming. So instead of pursuing and going to the craft, she ran back to the school with Tanya.
Okay.
Okay?
There were
Tanya,
some claims that Tanya had touched the craft.
I don't know about that, but Tanya got taken away in an ambulance.
Right.
And this part of the story comes up later. It gets really interesting.
This is Jackie Argent was her name. It's the friend's name, Jacqueline Argent.
Yes.
Because years
that's
later
right.
she talked quite a lot about it. In fact, I know I've got a picture of her. Here's some more images. So you can see, according to the descriptions, we're not talking a huge craft here. That's the size of an adult man. And let's see what else we've got here. I don't know who drew this. 2 crafts.
There was a gentleman, I don't know his name, he was a young boy at the time, and he said he saw 2 crafts.
Okay, so that's
And
the
he was
description.
super close to them. He said there was heat coming off them, but he witnessed the 2 side by side like that.
So you want to go back to Tanya, though. What happened with her? She gets taken off
So
in an
Tanya gets taken away in the ambulance, and nobody ever sees her again.
Again. And her friend Jacqueline tried to visit her.
Her friend, tried to visit her the next day, goes to the house where she's always gone to visit her, and there's someone there who is not Tanya's mother, because Tanya's mother did not speak English. This person spoke English, and said Tanya never lived here.
This is Jacqueline Argent in a documentary many years later.
That's right.
As an adult. She had a lot to say. She's a really good witness to this case.
She is.
There are other good ones as well, but I really like listening to her. You can find documentaries and information interviews with her out there on YouTube and on the web.
She's in a documentary called Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery.
Yeah, and this is from that
People want to check it
documentary,
out.
I believe.
Yeah.
So one of the things, can I just say one
Yeah.
thing she said is, like, after the object left, the school principal calls an emergency assembly of the whole school and all the faculty. And this is what he said. What you saw wasn't real, it didn't happen, and no one ever should talk about this ever again.
And if you do, you're going to get in trouble.
And yet there were men in suits. No one knew who these guys were. They were apparently government officials, military, and they are talking to the children. And they're saying, what you saw was nothing but an experimental craft. And by the way, don't ever talk about this again. Jacqueline Argent talks about this. In fact, I got a quote from her in here. I'm just going to show it. So she talks about it. She says, I was called down to the headmaster's office. There were 2 well-dressed men in suits. They were introduced to me in person, and I don't know where they came from. And I just love hearing her talk. She says, we went and said, I suppose you think you saw a flying saucer. I said, well, I didn't say that. I said I saw an object. And we suppose you saw little green men. So she's talking about how they're essentially just dismissing her. This is a newspaper article. This is one of the only documentary sources of the case.
I just want to add that she actually claims that they were quite bullied by these mysterious men that were coming to the school.
I think she said she burst into tears after she left the meeting. Like, they were really heavy-handed, these guys. There are no Australian government records of this event. People can only work off the newspaper. Even though the principal said no one talked about this, journalists did get wind of it, and they did do an investigation, but impression you get from this is like, because there was this heavy-handed silence that came down right away on the case, a lot of good information didn't come out.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I think the school really shut that down.
Yeah.
But, you know, it did get some media attention because it was on the front page of the local paper, and it ran for a couple of weeks. And they also had a Channel 9, I guess, in their area, TV news spot on this. And some of the kids were actually interviewed for that. And, excuse me, they got in trouble for it. They actually got detention. Joy Clark is one of those people who claims that she got detention for speaking to them, you know? So.
In 1966 in Australia, I guess they felt they could do that. This was when the weather balloon explanation actually was put out there. When it was reported, people were told that a weather balloon had been released earlier that morning. You've got only the most dense or obstinate government spokespeople, in my opinion, could possibly believe the weather balloon explanation. And yet, even recently, Australian TV put out a little piece on this when the documentary came out. And they bring out this talking head who says, oh, yes, weather balloons can really surprise people. Like, this is 2010, buddy, and you're still actually trying this out.
Well, they
got to be kidding.
On the anniversary of this, 16 years later, I believe, they asked these kids, because they're adults now, and they said, what do you think of the whole weather balloon thing? And they all said, I mean, that's crazy. I know what I saw.
Right.
I know what I saw. All of them are, sticking to their story. It was.
The principal years later said, this is a direct quote, I was prepped to tell the students that what they had seen didn't exist. Here's another witness. It was not an aircraft by any stretch of the imagination, and it certainly was not a weather balloon. When the local Melbourne News wanted to cover this years later, they looked through the archives and they found all the original video of the event.
That's right.
Like, where did that go? This is Paul Smith. He was one of the witnesses. He says, I looked up and I was facing the object in the sky, and he thought someone figured out how to project an image into the sky. So this is just too crazy. It was like too good of a flying saucer. This could not be real. And he said, after a while, trucks turned up, looked like army trucks. And there was one of the teachers that said that a man in a dark blue suit demanded photos taken.
That's right. Yeah, there was a woman in particular. I think she was a chemistry teacher there, and she had taken a whole bunch of pictures. As soon as this happened, she just grabbed her camera and just took tons of photos. And yeah, they did. They confiscated not only the pictures but the cameras.
Yeah, I mean, just incredible stuff. And yet, this is all from a weather balloon. You got to be kidding me.
Right.
Even years later, the Australian government was moving toward the position of saying, or at least some military spokesperson anyway, was saying, well, maybe, there's all kinds of secrets and there's experimental science. But what could this be 50 years later? Like, that they're still going to deny. One teacher was named Andrew Greenwood. He actually said that two officers came to his home and threatened him under the Official Secrets Act and said, you couldn't have seen a flying saucer at Westall because, well, there's no such thing as flying saucers. And if you talk about this, we will tell everyone that you're an alcoholic. This guy was not an alcoholic.
Wow.
These are some more of the witnesses, by the way. This is just very, very good, straightforward people. So.
I just want to read one more witness testimony, okay?
Yeah.
This is Terry Peck. Okay, so she said she was outside playing cricket, and she saw three unusual craft hovering over the school, and they were definitely not normal aircraft. After 10 minutes, we saw one go down into an area behind our school called the Grange that you were talking about, where we did our cross-country run. I was one of the first group over the fence to arrive there. It was on the ground in front of me. The other two girls had arrived before me. One was hysterical, and the other had fainted, as I was mentioning before. She said, I just looked at it. After a few minutes, it just raised up above me, about 12 feet, turned directly on its side, and went zoom straight up into the air, and disappeared almost instantly. and there were 2 other craft in the air at the time. So that,
What do you do with witness testimony that's so clear like
Yeah.
that, so straightforward, and there's so many of them? And the only thing the Australian government's been able to do is just pretend the whole thing didn't happen. No record,
that's right.
deny, weather balloon, experimental, and that Australian news
Newscast.
cast that I was looking at, after all these witnesses are talking about government pressure, you have one of the pro-government spokespeople that cut to him and he says, well, after all these years, people develop a lot of personal elaborations on the case. And I just thought, what an insult.
Yeah.
What an insult to the
Yeah.
witnesses
I think that's
to
how
actually
yeah.
cut to this guy at that moment, to undercut everything that they actually experienced. I mean, look, we don't have any photographs. Apparently they were confiscated. We don't have government records because those are unavailable. We've got 200 people who saw something crystal clear, and some of them all too clear. And one of them, this girl named Tanya, I think paid a very, very significant price for her encounter.
Yeah, as we were saying, they said that her friend had never seen her again. However, she had been in touch with an Australian researcher and was okay, but she just preferred to stay in, to have her privacy. And I'm not sure what happened after that with her. There were some rumors, but I wasn't able to confirm them in time.
I was at the Westall location. I was fortunate to visit Melbourne, and I met with the Victorian UFO group there. Very excellent group of researchers there, by the way. And they took me to that location. And I spoke with a lot of the researchers who knew the case very, very well, and it was just fascinating to hear it from them who had spent a lot of time looking into it. It's a very, very, it's a personal case to the folks who live in that area to this day.
Well, yeah, the level of response is what really gets a lot of people. So the government authorities, the Royal Australian Air Force, the Army, the Civil Defense Organization, all of these responded. Yet, they did this thorough, extensive search through the government documents and couldn't find anything anywhere. And I just want to say, they went through like the DOD, External Affairs, the Army, Air Force, Navy. Nothing exists anywhere. But there was this massive, massive response to it.
Yeah.
So
it was a real thing. It happened, and yet this is what we deal with this phenomenon. But people will say there's no such thing as a cover-up. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is just one more example of obvious cover-up. You have, again, as I said before, you have to be the most dense, obstinate person to look at this evidence and then just say, no, there's really nothing to it. It's just totally conventional and conventional. Well, give us something to work with here. What conventional explanation are you talking about that could make everyone say this was a flying saucer? And with all the other effects that it left. So we have one more case to get to. How do we get to it? This is from your native land, by the way. Let's do a map. Now, to my knowledge, you weren't going to hang out much in Manitoba.
In the prairies, no. I spent the winter there, in Winterpeg, as we call it, Winnipeg, which is in Manitoba. Too cold for me. Too cold for most Canadians there.
Even Canadians, so they can handle it. But no. Well, this was not a winter case. This was in May 1967. So we had 64, we had 65, we had 66, and I was going just north of the U.S. border, about 45 miles, I think, in Lismanic. This is where Falcon Lake is in Manitoba, just north of Winnipeg. And this is another really, really good case. So ground, like low treetop level, and the other one keeps going down inland on like a flat top of a rock that is fairly large, and we're talking about 160 feet from it, 160 feet. It is very, very close. So the one in the air just leaves, and it changes all kinds of colors. It goes red, it goes orange, and so on, as it flies off to the west, and it's gone. So there's one crash, it's on the ground, and this is what Nicholas is looking at. He spends a half hour with us, looking at this object as it changes colors, and this is a close-up of his drawing. He actually drew this at the time while looking at the crash.
Wow.
Yeah. So there were no markings on it. It had like an iridescence to it, he said, like bright red and orange. No markings. There was a purplish light that came from openings around the dome of the craft around here. And so he just stayed there. He's making a sketch of the object, and he's noticing the size is about 35, 40 feet in diameter. That is about the size of the Tic Tac UFO. And it's about 8 feet high, he says. So, and then this thing
Same
was
size as Westall, by the way. Australia.
Oh, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I forgot to get into the
I
size
know.
of that object. So, very good. This is an additional 3 feet high up here, this little dome part. So it's a decent sized craft. You can get in there and move around. He smelled what he thought was like sulfur. He heard whirring of like a fast electric motor and a hissing sound, again with a hissing sound.
Interesting.
So, as if like air were being taken into it. And then he notices there's a hatch that's open, and here's a drawing of the hatch right there. And he gets closer to this. He can't see anything inside of it first because he's just not close enough, and he sees beams of a purplish light inside there. And he gets up to about 60 feet of the craft, and he hears two voices, and they sound human-like. One was higher pitched than the other one, and his assessment at this time is that this was an American test vehicle of some sort. So he gets closer to it, and he says, "Okay, Yankee boys, having trouble?" It's his first statement. He says, "Come on out, and we'll see what we can do about it." And he doesn't get into front, and then he tries Russian. You should have said, eh? Well, he speaks in Russian, German, Italian, French, and Ukrainian.
Wow.
Like, so he must not have been Polish. He had been Russian or Ukrainian. That's my mistake. So he's using all of these different languages, and the voices stop. And suddenly, panels slide over the opening, and it seals it. He says like a camera shutter. The whole thing just being sealed off. And he noticed that the walls of the craft had like a honeycombed look, or something to what he described as a grape pattern on it. And that's where he draws it right over here, as you can see. Okay? So after the hatch closes, he touched the craft. He had a glove on his hand. He touched it, and it burned the fingertips of his glove. The craft tilted a little bit, started spinning really fast, and he was standing near this exhaust area, the geometric pattern, and when the craft started moving, a blast from this opening came out and hit him right on the chest, in the upper abdomen part, very hard. And there's a picture of him. This is Stephen McCulloch in a hospital bed, or in bed, and look at that pattern on his chest. That's not fake. This actually happened to him.
Well, it's amazing that we have this picture.
There's some other pictures as well. I'll show in just a minute. But actually, his undershirt has the same pattern, and it caught fire. And there's a picture of that. This is another image of him in his hospital bed. He's obviously not feeling well. And here's an image of his undershirt, what was remaining. You can see it's burned. And here's the pattern. There's McCulloch. So anyway, the shirt was on fire. He actually took the shirt off and threw it to the ground, and he stamped out the fire. So anyway, here's some water. So he's got burns on his abdomen. He's feeling sick. He is inhaling vapors from the machine, and he believes that might have caused it. And he looks up to see the craft leave after it blasts at him. So both of the crafts are gone, and he feels a rush of air as it takes off. The craft turns different colors. It's orange. And then it actually, as it departs, in his estimation, it went faster than any aircraft he'd ever seen. So it went really, really fast. There's much more. He's smelling sulfur. He smells what seems like burned electrical circuits, and so on. So he goes back to the landing site. He feels nauseous. got a headache, and he finally reaches the highway, and he gets a Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, who's driving by, and this is what's surprising here. Canada is a place where you think everyone's helpful and friendly. Not this RCMP, would not help. So that's interesting. We tried to get help at the park headquarters. That failed. He goes back to his motel where he was staying. A few hours later, he takes the bus back to Winnipeg. He calls the Winnipeg Tribune for help, and he says, I don't want publicity, but I will tell you what happened to me. His son is there. His son takes him to a hospital where he gets medical attention, and the burns on his abdomen were legit. They were diagnosed as superficial, so that means they didn't go deep into the body, and they just took him home. But for several days, he had nausea, headaches, lack of appetite. He lost something like 20 pounds in the next few weeks, I believe. I saw a physician who said, we're going to check you for radiation, but they never really found any effects of radiation. And again, here's some pictures of Metallic, and that's really all that we've got of that whole thing. So, Metallic, there was, they went to look for radiation. They took him to a whole body radiation counter. It was called an atomic power installation. And this thing detects and measures gamma radiation from isotopes in the body. That's about all that I know about it. But anyway, there was no abnormal radiation count that they detected. So he lost about 22 pounds over the next week, then regained his strength and regained some weight in the aftermath. And there doesn't seem to be any long-lasting damaging effect that he experienced from the fetish. That's Metallic. That was investigated at the time by the Condon Committee, which was going at the time.
Oh.
And they kind of gave it an inconclusive response. They didn't say that this was legit. And they kind of implied that they didn't think it was...
hoax, or something like that.
Well, they didn't say explicit hoax. They didn't go that far, but the investigator of that case didn't really give it a ringing endorsement. So I think he thought it might have been a hoax, but I don't think there's anything that really points to a hoax in this case. Once again, you've got...
No, it's just that it was the Condon Committee.
Yeah. So those are the four that we've got for this session. I think those are pretty good cases.
They are good cases. I think so too. And it's interesting. They're all since we're just looking at, they're all over the place. Geographically, there are some similarities in the crafts, for example. The crafts reported in all of these cases were the smaller size.
And actually, you've got the Caro and the Valenzoll crafts are potentially identical. And you've got the Westall and the Metallic, the Stock and Lake, are very similar, not necessarily identical.
Yeah, but they, even things that you were saying about this last one, the Westall one was a low buzzing sound, there was heat coming off it, there were lights on the bottom, so it was smooth on the top, it was saucer shaped.
Yeah.
So there are quite a few similarities.
Yeah. Now, when we think of encounter cases
and
nowadays...
silver colored.
Right. When you think of encounter cases with extraterrestrials like these days, you think, oh, abduction. Or you think gray aliens. And, now we only have sightings of aliens in the first two of the cases. But they're not quite like gray aliens. They're similar. They're short, large heads, bald. The Valenzoll case, I think you get a closer view of these creatures, and they're obviously not human, but I don't know if they're exactly described as gray aliens either. They seem a little different to me. It's hard to know. All these years have gone by, and there's no photographs. But
the description sounds human-like, but definitely very different. Shorter, large heads.
Right.
Longer limbs.
It does seem like in that case, those beings were perhaps actually genuinely interested in the crops or in the lavender itself.
Like he's kind of in the way, let's just paralyze him, and they apparently they continued on with what they were doing.
Right.
But it sounds to me like a lot of the details that he hid, that he didn't want to disclose,
Yeah.
are, potentially very interesting, because he did imply in some of these things that he had other contacts and that he
Right.
had beautiful experiences. One thing I didn't say that Robert had said was he described, he didn't think they were negative, even though they had paralyzed him.
Mm-hmm.
He described them as having this goodness in their eyes.
Okay.
So that's, of course, we know that they can manipulate us, but that's just his report.
Well, I guess
I won't say we know anything.
we don't know that.
It appears they can manipulate us.
That's true. That's true. But it's also, I'm just going to say this much on the other side of it, which is there are a lot of researchers going all the way back, serious researchers, who have also formed the same opinion that these beings are actually good, or at least they don't think it's harm. And I would just say that, there are reasons to think both of those extremes, like positive and negative. So I definitely leave that open. One thing, yes?
No, it's completely right, though. It seems like they're interested in the land. Yeah.
One thing about all four of those cases, and this is really the case, I think, with all of these encounters, that these beings did not want to be observed by us. And or at least it seems that way. So Socorro, the beings, didn't realize that Zamora was watching them at first. I don't know where they got in and got out. The Valençol case, we don't really know, but they didn't really want to, they didn't want to interact with him. The Westall case, I don't know what was going on there, but objects came and they immediately departed when a bunch of kids come running out. Can you imagine being one of the beings inside the craft? Seriously. If there were live beings in there, they'd come down, maybe there's a problem, maybe, I don't know what it was, and they just happened to land in a field.
Herd of children.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of interesting. It's almost funny, but not everything that happened in that case was funny.
Right.
And then the McCallum case as well, like these beings, maybe they weren't aware that they were being observed, and when they were, they immediately got out of there. So there's definitely this evasiveness and lack of willingness to want to interact with people. Now, that's not always reported cases. There are some interaction cases reported over the years where people will say, yes, these beings actually chatted with us. And not all of those people are impossible to believe, I'll just say. Like, there's enough cases reported over the years where people have made these claims, and so that's part of it as well. But in these that we've looked at tonight, definitely evasive attitude by these other beings.
Agreed.
They're doing something, and they don't want to be observed. These were all 50 years ago, these cases. It's amazing.
And the one in France was, we just did that show not too long ago on cases in France.
Yes, indeed.
And it still follows a bit of a pattern of what was going on in France.
Right.
With the wands paralyzing people while they go about their business.
Yes, absolutely.
That was in the 50s.
Well, I think there's many, many more things that we can say about encounter cases, and even these four, but we probably said everything we're going to say tonight. I don't know if we want to take any member questions from the public, or prepare to wrap it up.
Hi, Jeff Family.
Well, this has been interesting for folks. I find these cases just endlessly fascinating. And I think as we go through the week, I would like to do the same type of thing for the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and well into the 21st century. There are definitely good contact cases in the 21st century, and don't think we're not going to talk about them. We are going to talk about them. There's some very, very high-profile ones as well that I would like to really examine. So, anything here?
From John Miller, when is Tracy going to cover Dyatlov Pass, the Dyatlov Pass incident? When's that going to be done? I am so into that. So don't think because we haven't brought it up that we're not going to eventually go into that. It's just that there's so much information.
Well, what's happened is, a couple of weeks ago, this was all new to you, and you purchased several books, and you've been taking through them meticulously. We've been talking off on our own about this every so often. And for our member site, original members, if you are a member there, you can actually hear Tracy and I talk about the Outlook Pass in some detail. And you have a lot of detail that you have picked up about this case. I'm very impressed, and I love hearing you get into a lot of the details. It's very complex.
It is
It's
very
a very
complex.
case. You're
There's-
blessed. A true violent man who knows and personal hitman. Look, you've always known the official story of JFK's assassination was a fairy tale designed for children. But Philip Lavelle really laid out the facts. Now in part 7, we discuss the formation and deep deception of the official body charged with investigating the president's murder, that is, the infamous Warren Commission. It's a travesty after all these years, so-called authoritative news and information sources treat this as a legitimate investigation. What an insult to our intelligence to say nothing of our future commitment. We're getting close to the end here, but not quite. We still have to discuss the mysterious deaths of many people connected to the assassination, the Garrison trial, and a bit more. But that's for later. For now, join me and Philip Lavelle for part 7 of the JFK Sessions, the Warren Commission. It's great to have you back, Philip Lavelle.
Great. It's great to be back, Richard.
Now we're on the phone, and we're doing the 7th part, which I guess we're going to take it from the Warren Commission and see how far we go. So that's the time.
All right, that's the plan.
So let's just set the stage. The president's been killed. It's been clear. Obviously, there's a conspiracy going on. We discussed the mangling of the whole travesty of the autopsy and the fight over the president's body, the killing of Lee Harvey Oswald by Jack Ruby. My goodness gracious, and LBJ's connection to this. By the way, I didn't know, and a lot of people didn't know that LBJ had his own personal hitman. You got into all of that and more. Just incredible.
Mac Wallace.
Yeah. So now LBJ is president, and the nation is mourning. They want to, put closure on this, even though Oswald's been taken out with Mr. Jack Ruby, rotting away in prison at this time, and there's this thing called the Warren Commission. So, can you shed light to listeners on what this was? Many people have heard the Warren Commission. Some people know about it. A lot of people don't know that much about it. And I'm sure you can tell us a little bit about what the significance of this was.
Right. Let's fast forward 10 years after the Warren Commission came out to the Watergate tapes, and we can get Richard Nixon's thoughts on the Warren Commission at that time. There's a part that was not blocked out or declassified. When the Warren Commission came up, there's a part where he says that was the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on the American people. So that's about where you can start what the Warren Commission really ended up being. And that was formed very much, I think it was formed on November the 29th where they actually did November 29th of 63. And
after the president's killed.
Right, and as you can expect, there was talks of getting a congressional hearing investigation going. There was a senatorial investigation that was being planned. In addition, there was going to be a court of inquiry officially by the Attorney General of Texas. So all of these investigations were now ready to begin and to get going. And back in Washington, D.C., LBJ and the cronies back there were thinking, what's the best way to get this all under their control? And there was a few people that actually came up that were on it. There was a professor at Yale named Rothschild that was involved. There was a few other folks that came up, and of course, J. Edgar Hoover, etc. Because I can't say that Johnson was immediately on board with this, but he got on board quick. And some other folks, and it remains a little murky about who came up with all of the names that were eventually on this, but It was a group that was formed, and it was whole idea was to stave off any of these other investigations.
That's a
Where
really
it would be
important,
harder to control.
that's a super important point, and I don't think, I mean, I'm sure JFK researchers are well aware of this, but I don't think most people, you know, it's been more than 50 years now, I don't think most people are quite aware that this was created in large measure to stave off competitive, genuine investigations that would arrive at conclusions, who knows what and who knows where, that Jim Garrison would do a number of years later, but that's skipping ahead. So yeah, it's an interesting point. And I guess is it helpful to mention this is named after Chief Justice of the United States at the time, Earl Warren, who was the leader of the commission, or am I jumping ahead of where you want to go with
No. No, that's exactly where it is. And Earl Warren was a reluctant head of this thing. He turned it down 2 times for sure. And then I think it was the 3rd time that Lyndon Johnson, what's called the Johnson treatment, where he would bring people in and really twist their arms, etc. And what really pushed on both Warren and the other folks that became involved that we had to do this because if there's going to be a communist Russian plot behind this, we have to really make sure that we keep a lid on this. Don't let it get out of control. It's going to lead to World War III. And the logic and all that behind that totally escapes me. It was as if, because he implies that the American people will be demanding World War III if we don't do this investigation instead of keep it down to something very, very simple.
Let me ask you a question. How widespread was the belief among the general population that this was a Soviet or Russian plot to kill Kennedy? Was this a widespread belief?
I enjoy working at Elements because there are so many learning opportunities, whether it's technical skills, professional development, communication skills.
So everyone who works there is amazing. They're really helpful. Everyone communicates really well.
Normally when you walk into a career, you have to take care of yourself. You have to really be thinking about yourself. But inside Elements is different. We all help each other learn new things. We all have different techniques and different styles.
We help each other grow in professional development and research, with client relations and therapeutic skills.
Very willingness to help. It's a huge teamwork environment.
We're an amazing team working together.
They want me to be my best self. So how can I be my best self? And am I bringing my best self to this job? It's almost like you're not going to work. I feel like I've learned and grown as a therapist and as a person working at Elements.
I don't believe so. The big thing that Johnson was hearing, the rumor mill was abound that this was an inside job that was done. And especially in Texas, that's where many people figured that this was something done by Lyndon Johnson, who the people of Texas were very familiar with. And he was trying to stave off those kinds of rumors. As you get into the other members of the Warren Commission, they would talk about how they just didn't want it out that America was like a banana republic, that they could change a leader by gunfire, etc. And that's about where it was. But there was a lot of rumors. I don't believe it was a widespread thing around the country that there was any specific country behind it, like Russia,
I wouldn't say.
or...
And Johnson obviously knew it wasn't the Russians. He clearly knew everything important that was going on there.
Right,
So
and yeah, it's a good time to mention, I think November 29th, what date this came out in the early 90s when a close confidant, I forget forget his name, of the Kennedy family, was sent over on behalf of Bobby to Russia, because he had back channel folks that he spoke to during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And now he was doing that. He sent over a very close friend that wanted the Russians to know that the Kennedys know that this didn't have anything to do with Russia, and that it was a, quote, high-level domestic conspiracy, end of quote. So the Kennedys knew, Bobby Kennedy knew immediately this was an inside job, and who all was behind it and everything, he probably didn't have it, but he knew this was not a communist plot.
Can you talk about the makeup of the Warren Commission? First of all, Earl Warren, if he was a reluctant leader of it, I'm going to take a wild guess and assume he wasn't really the guy making most of the heavy decisions, or was it? I mean, Alan Dulles, of course, former CIA director, was a very big part of it, and I would think he was a much more significant mover and shaker. But can you lay out who's really running this?
Yeah, this is really the Dulles Commission.
Yeah.
It really is. And of course, we'll just go over the names really quick of who were on it. Alan Dulles. Why you're going to put on a former CIA director who had been fired during the Bay of Pigs for misleading the president and for this operation going bad? Why you would name him? It escapes me, it escapes a lot of people. Then you've Hale Boggs, who's a Democrat from Alaska, that's on there. Gerald Ford, who's a Republican from Michigan, he's on there. The current FBI director, John McCloy, is on there. We've got Senator Richard Russell, Senator Sherman Cooper. All of these folks have ties going back well with the government, and they're often all connected with each other in the dealings that they've had in the past. So these are just not names picked out of a hat. They were all collectively picked beyond this.
Russell, I know, was head of the Senate Armed Services Committee for many years. Ford turned out to be the ultimate team player. We can talk about him as we move along here. But yeah, these are all, I assume, reliable establishment insiders.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And it turned out that Ford was known to be very friendly to both the intelligence community and the FBI. In fact, he was considered the actual close confidant of Hoover on the commission and was reporting all the stuff that was going on back to Hoover.
Can I jump ahead with you here? I mean, I should really let you tell the story. You started with Nixon, who knew the Warren Commission was a total fraud, and said so privately in the Warren Commission. Nixon, of course, had Ford as his vice president for a while there. And Ford, of course, is there any record of the two of them talking about the Warren Commission? Like they must have come up, or what do you think?
Would Ford have been talking to Nixon? I would believe there's probably nothing on the record. I would think that they both knew that the other knew what really happened.
I mean, he was Nixon's vice president for a while, and, in the Senate, so.
Right, yeah. I mean, did they ever officially talk about, I don't know, what was on the Watergate tapes? This is in the book of, they had those two guys that were the top aides for Nixon.
Ehrlichman and Haldeman.
Yeah, Ehrlichman and Haldeman.
Yeah.
And I think it was Haldeman's book where during the course of discussions a lot in the Oval Office, suddenly the Bay of Pigs comes up. And finally, Haldeman says on the tape, the Bay of Pigs doesn't have anything to do with this. And Ehrlichman gently calls him off. And then afterwards, Ehrlichman says to him, that's code. Anytime Nixon brings up the Bay of Pigs, he's really referring to the JFK assassination. So there's a little intrigue there about it. And then that dovetails into at some point where Nixon makes the remark about the Warren Commission being a total fraud. Of course, it was meant to be a private opinion, but of course it got out many years later.
Well,
So,
let's jump into the warrant commission then, and talk about the evidence they looked at, the evidence they ignored. You did get into a lot of this in the previous arguments of the committee, but how do you want to approach this now?
I would say let's just talk about the investigative arm, really, of the whole Warren Commission was the FBI. And that was who they used. And of course, we also got some other information from the Secret Service and from intelligence agencies. But as time would go on, it would be learned of how much information was kept from the Warren Commission by the intelligence agencies. So that is something that came out and was formally put in the House Select Committee report that would have been done in 1979. That was the second investigation that was done, and the conclusion of them was that there was key critical information that was left and was kept from the Warren Commission by the intelligence agency.
Not necessarily the FBI or the FBI?
Mostly that was the intelligence agencies, but they also said that the FBI investigation was woefully inadequate in delving into any aspect of conspiracy. So they officially put that in the report. And but the FBI was the main arm, and that had bothered a lot of the Warren Commission members, that all of this is coming through J. Edgar Hoover, and of course they all knew him. And Hale Fogg was very critical of the investigation there. His quote after reading the initial report, which came out like December 9th of 1963, he said, this report leaves me with was a New York Times article about December 3rd, which says that the FBI's initial report, which is very, very comprehensive, is going to come out, and that basically is nailing this thing down. I mean, it's really amazing how they had the conclusions and all of this so early on. And this was an investigation that really, it reached a conclusion first. Oswald did it, acting alone with no one else, and now we're going to investigate it, and we're going to fit all of the evidence to that conclusion. That's basically the Warren Commission in a nutshell.
I'm looking at this, I'm pulling this up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So yeah, it says that they first met on December 5th, 1963 in the
That
National
was the Warren Commission, correct?
Yes. And then
Yeah,
concluded, looks like sometime in 1964.
That's the Warren Commission. When I said the report was December 9th, that was the initial FBI report, which went to the Warren Commission. So that was it. But, I mean, not much changed. The one big change, and it remains to this today, the FBI report that had come out initially in December of 63, the Secret Service report that came out initially, all have 3 shots and 3 hits. First shot hits Kennedy in the back, second shot hits Conley, third shot hits Kennedy in the head. And that's what both of them said. That's how both of them remained. It is only the Warren Commission in their final report that had changed that. The FBI didn't redo and reconfigure everything and then state this is the FBI's opinion. For some reason, J. Edgar Hoover didn't want to do it, and he just kept. So it was the Warren Commission that was going to go along with that up until this James Tate, who actually changed everything. And I think it was June of 64. James Tate, he was the guy who was underneath the underpass that got hit with either shrapnel from the curb or a piece of bullet from a missed shot.
Yeah. That takes it from 3 shots now to 4.
And what he does is he reads a report in the newspaper, I imagine it was the Dallas Morning News, that says that the Warren Commission is about to come out with the final report. We've got 3 shots and three hits. And he says 3 shots and 3 hits. I'm on the front of the Dallas Morning News on Saturday, November 23rd, with a photo there of myself, and it shows that we are showing where the curve is hit. They have not even talked to me. They have never talked to me about this. And now they're going to come out and say there was three shots and 3 hits. It was on the front page that there was a missed shot. So then he gets sent off, apparently a letter. It went to the Attorney General, I think, of Texas, that had then sent a letter with a copy of the news article, the report that James Tague had done and had signed, and he sent it on to the Warren Commission and said, you have a final report that says 3 shots and 3 hits. This guy says he was never contacted yet. He's saying there's a missed shot there for sure. So anyway, then suddenly the Warren Commission had to completely rechange and backtrack. So then that had started. I actually got to speak with that guy in November of 2013. And it was fun to talk to him because he was, I think at the time, officially a used car salesman. Yet it was him that changed history by getting them to change the story, and he was the one that was the birth for the single bullet theory.
Yeah, so the magic bullet sometimes is
Yeah.
called. So,
Well, yeah, there's actually the single bullet and the magic bullet are actually 2 separate things.
oh, okay. Well, you'll have to explain
Yeah,
that.
just real quick, the single bullet is the fact that one bullet hits both Kennedy, went through Kennedy, hits Conley, goes through him, causes all of the damage to Conley, and that single bullet then did all of that damage to those 2 men. The magic bullet is the fact that that's Mission Exhibit 399, as it's called, the actual bullet that they have in the evidence in the archives there is very close to pristine. It was just slightly misshapen a little bit. It had done all of that damage, and based on where it hit Kennedy lower in his back, about 5.5 to 6 inches below the collar, and then had it gone through him, went through, hit Conley, hit the wrist, which is a bone, then it hits the very dense wrist bone, and then ends up in the thigh, and the fact that it's perfectly, almost pristine, but yet it matches up to these rifles that supposedly Oswald had. So that's why there's a magic bullet that is really talked about, and then the single bullet theory.
Right, exactly. I follow you. So let me ask you this question. The investigation of all of this is very obvious from your description of the day of the assassination stuff that there were many bullets flying around. You were saying maybe as much as 10 or so bullets were fired. And that actually seems to make a lot more sense. Certainly there were many witnesses who said that there were more than 3 bullets fired. How was it that the FBI did such a terrible job of interviewing people? Obviously, I mean, how diligent were they even finding witnesses? They clearly left so many witnesses out anyway, right?
Yeah, they had now the evidence had to match the conclusion, and they knew from the firing of the rifle that it takes about 2.3 seconds to recycle the gun and then shoot. That does not count the aiming. So, I mean, so for the very most, knowing that from the Zapruder film, it was always believed that all of this occurred within 6 seconds, and that can only account for 3 shots. The first shot was already in the chamber there, all set to go. All he had to do was aim. That should be the best shot, you would think, from a common sense standpoint. While it is believed that that shot, they imply they don't state it in the Warren Commission report, but they imply that that was probably the shot that is missed. And then from that point, it takes 2.3 seconds to get the next, to have the next bullet in, then another 2.3 seconds there. But the 2.3 seconds, that's just to cycle it through. That's not to aim. So realistically, you would need, oh my gosh, to do it right. That is why none of the experts that they ever put on the job, nor did the CBS special done in 1967, no one was ever able to duplicate it.
Right, with that type of analysis, rifle.
Correct. Yeah. So the shots, of course, I can't. It'd be nice to have a visual where you show the dent that's in between. It's up there on the header of the limo that was taken. That was a photo taken by a Secret Service guy that got out, and it shows a dent, like a perfect bullet dent in between that just above, I think, the rearview mirror. So that's got to be a bullet strike. They've got also the photo of a bullet strike where it's across the street from the grassy knoll, right by a sewer lid there. In fact, that mark is still there. You can still see it today. And that's where they have the photos of the guy in the suit, believed to be the FBI guy, that was putting that in his pocket that day. That was at 12:40 p.m. on November the 22nd. So that's another bullet there. And then, of course, you have a bullet that was reportedly found when they went looking for pieces of the skull that were found in the back of the limousine back in D.C., where that was a fully intact bullet that was reportedly found, along with the pieces of the skull, about 3 fairly good-sized pieces that they asked for the Secret Service to go check the car to find out so they would have it in order to reconstruct the skull for the funeral.
Well, the logical question is going to be, like, in a normal world with any sense of logical justice, like, were there any FBI agents involved in this investigation that realized that this investigation is a cover-up? And are there any records of any FBI agents complaining and saying, hey, wait a minute, we've got all this other evidence, I don't understand what's going on here? Like,
yeah.
Would that
They understood, yeah. Now that's popped up in the FBI investigation. They all know, they all understand that they are not to go anywhere beyond any evidence that shows a conspiracy. Anything that points to that, they are not to follow. And they are to stop.
Explicitly?
Probably grapevine. It was, the word probably got out. J. Edgar Hoover, there was one of the attorneys, I think, on the Warren Commission spoke many years later that had said something to the effect, well, we were never supposed to look into anything that involved a conspiracy. So it was sort of a unwritten thing. There was nothing that really came out officially.
Let's take a quick break. I'm Richard Dolan here with JFK assassination researcher Philip Lavelle on ABI Radio. Welcome back to my interview with JFK researcher Philip Lavelle as we continue our discussion.
Of course, we haven't even talked about the famous Katzenbach memo that was written on November the 25th of 1963. And that was probably all written up and prepared on the night Lee Harvey Oswald died, but it was officially dated November the 25th. Have you heard about the Katzenbach memo?
No, I have to say I'm not familiar with it, so I just explain to me.
All right, that was the memo that was written by
I know one thing. He was supposedly advising, gave advice that led to the Warren Commission.
Katzenbach, yeah. He was part of that. wrote a memo to Johnson A. Bill Moyers and outlined his thoughts on November the 25th, and also declassified information as J. Edgar Hoover essentially saying the same thing on Sunday, November the 24th. And I will just read from the report. It says, quote, "It is important that all of the facts surrounding President Kennedy's assassination be made public in a way which will satisfy people in the United States and abroad. That all the facts have been told and that a statement to this effect be made now. Number one, the public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he did not have Confederates who are still at large, that the evidence is such that he would have been convicted at trial. Number two, speculation about Oswald's motivation ought to be cut off, and we should have some basis for rebutting the thought that this was a communist conspiracy, or, as the Iron Curtain Press is saying, a right-wing conspiracy to blame it on communists. Unfortunately, the facts on Oswald seem about too packed, too obvious. Martin, Cuba, Russian white. The Dallas police have put out statements on the communist conspiracy theory, and it was they who were in charge when he was shot in gun violence. So, you can tell this is a formal memo, November 25th, within hours of the accused assassin getting shot in front of 70 Dallas police, that says that right now the public should be told that it was Oswald alone, acting alone, and that's the way it should go. That essentially is almost a smoking gun.
Yes, I would agree. Within hours of the death of Oswald, you have a memo recommending the creation of a public commission to pin everything on Oswald. That's what that is.
That's essentially it.
Yeah.
You know, I believe that memo came out in 1975, as did a bunch of other stuff. And of course, by this time, Hoover's dead, so you can't talk to him. And of course, the press is dutifully very happy not to want to pursue things like this. You know, you would think you would want to be pursuing things like this, and of course it was at the same time that this came out, or very close to it, where the head of the FBI at that time, Gray, had to admit that yes, the FBI did end up getting a note about a week before the assassination directly from Lee Harvey Oswald, that after Oswald got shot and killed, they went and flushed the note down the toilet, as well as some other file materials that they had on Oswald.
What memo did they flush?
The memo, it was a note left by Lee Harvey Oswald to the FBI about a week before the assassination. What was in that note is brought down.
Membership, to tell you the truth, I will put those arms tonight. I gotta put size on 15 first. I don't have time. I'll quit them tonight. See, I don't know where SARMs are going to be used for me at all, considering that I do bulking stacks and cutting stacks. I guess
SARMs is for what exactly?
well, they hit the androgen receptor and they don't, I mean, they hit the anabolic receptor and they take away most of the androgenic side effects like body hair, increased sweating, prostate effects, effects of the brain. Steroids basically go to every cell receptor in the body. And then what they do is I call them the supervisor. They say, hey, let's set things up. That's all they're doing.
They're like an expediter.
Water. Yeah, that's a good way to call it. And SARMs hit specific areas of the muscle. So, in effect, they're not for guys like me, is what he's saying.
Why waste your money?
And when he's saying they're blocking the receptor, when I should be getting my DECA and my equipoise and test and Dianabol, which is what I'm taking now, I'm going to hold off on
How much shit can you possibly fucking take on
Well, there's a research, see what the biggest guys take, and you got to do it. Let's see how the biggest guys live. guy Mike Heidi does, what kind of water you drinking? What are you eating? You know, you can't eat 4 ounces of protein source per meal. You gotta either eat 12 or 16, 6 times a day, at least every 3 hours. Just to repeat the process going over and over again, that's the best you can do. As a variable to I can control.
I'm just looking at Lenny's shirt. I know, isn't that fucking great? That's based on I mean, he did a great fucking job. I can't even keep track of these Lenny and Christina shirts anymore. Who said what? Is that the first time? There should be something else coming soon. They've been asking for lovely. I don't know about the Christina shirts. The people have been messaging. Where can we send stuff for?
Liz could message the show.
It's like a cat and mouse game for you to.
Yeah.
But you know, if you did ever eventually meet her, it would ruin all of the mystique. You know? That would be it.
I don't think it's possible.
Well, if it gives you motivation to live longer.
No matter about living longer, it's the quality of life.
And you think
Nothing else stuck up in a cookie cutter in the room. What the hell, everybody has to get to look at your life and admit there's times where, hey, you could have had a better outcome and you control it. Everyone controls their life, believe it or not. Of course. People can beat you, they can touch you, they can kill you, but they can't control you.
you're right about that. Life boils down to the choices that you make.
Gotta think it through and gotta be the same mind.
Plus timing too. Timing is fucking everything. Right place, right time. Right place, wrong time. Wrong place, wrong time.
It don't happen by chance.
Well, see, you know, most people are lazy nowadays. They want everything done for them. They don't want to go out and do shit. They want to sit back and plan their. Look at how Amazon's delivering fucking food now. You don't have to leave your house for shit. You don't have to leave your house now. Like, why would you be that fucking lazy? It's unbelievable.
If you feel like
Because they can sit at home and socialize on a computer or a phone. They don't want to go out and actually socialize with human beings in real life. They'd rather just do it over the phone and sit in their fucking house and have no personality.
it just seems to me some people would go flipping nuts if they went took away their social media and the phone.
Oh yeah. Most people would. I remember the times when there was none of this shit. Oh yeah. We get along just fine, man. You just go out looking for people. Yeah, you just go looking for people right now. We don't give a shit. It was actually kind of nice. Like, you know, sometimes when you shut your phone off or you don't have it for a few hours, it's actually kind of a relief.
There's definitely more people out walking around than there is now. That's for sure.
All you have to do to see that is travel to a region of the world where technology is not at a premium. Like, I remember when I was in Boca Chica, Dominican Republic. You know, all people wanted to do was hang out on the beach, drink beer, and play merengue and salsa music and dance. No cell phones, no big screen TVs, no high-speed internet. They just, as long as they had their music, their friends, their booze, and good food, all night without partying, you know. Now you go out and you get 4 people at a table and everybody's staring at you crying. Yeah, it really is. No social
Then
skills.
again, I'll admit there's more times where I look at the phone and look at a coworker.
That's true.
You know, they're useless enough in themselves. I think I was talking about this interview. You know, people say, "Oh, happy birthday to you," because they want you to say someone it's their birthday.
Exactly. Right. They want. Well, that's why a lot of people will do nice shit for people or whatever, because they're expecting it in return. Just do it because you want to, not because you're expecting that, you know, that back.
They have other people's ways. They have their space, their personal space.
Oh, happy belated birthday, by the way.
Yeah, May 18th, thank you.
You worked on your birthday, right?
Of course. I love cookie cutters, and then as they take off, people thought I was crazy because they have to put it on a
I was
board.
gonna say that's what you should do.
April birthday
Calling.
on the bulletin board.
Last year my birthday fell on a day off, so I didn't have to deal with the balloon being tied to my desk chair and all that crap. I know this fucking I know the way shit out of my job this week. That's a little much.
Who cares? Nobody cares about you. They care about themselves.
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about before we started the podcast. I have this horrible boot on my leg now, going on almost 2 weeks because I tore a calf muscle. And everywhere I go, well, not everywhere I go, but at my job, at the supermarket, if I'm out at the restaurant, people will commonly ask me, oh, what happened to your leg? And I'll spend as little time as possible telling the story. I was out for a morning jog and I felt a pop on my lower leg, and I knew I fucked something up. I keep it in 10 seconds or less. And then whoever I'm speaking to immediately seizes the opportunity. Oh, well, 12 years ago I was snowboarding and I tore this and I broke this and now I have 6 rods in my leg, and to this day I still feel pain, and then 5 years later the other leg, it's like, I'm an ass.
It's like, okay, does it make this any better for me? Fucking asshole. Because yours is the worst injury. Now that's gonna make me feel better about this injury?
The narcissism is off the charts. Like,
Ridiculous.
They see it as an opportunity to talk about themselves. In reality, not giving a flying fuck what's wrong with me. They just want to talk about the injury that they have. I don't care.
It's like,
I don't give a shit.
One up in you, yeah. I'll invite you over for dinner at their house, and then they can explain that story to you and give you some dinner. No.
Yeah. Take me out for a drink.
Like in the gym, I've seen many people come up and say the stupidest shit to me, and if I didn't tell them off, they keep going. And then you see them in public or whatever, and then if you tell them off, they don't even want to look at you because they're in a hurry. But you come in the gym, it's their time to fuck off, because they're not doing any lifting.
Yeah, they're there to fucking socialize.
Go to LA Fitness right now,
Between 5 and 8 o'clock at night.
How you doing? Or the order said, how you doing? What the fuck do you think I'm doing? Can't even fucking breathe.
Look at me, how do you
live in this place for rep? You're coming over, and then you won't even give you the time of day in public. Turn your head because you're with your old lady.
I'm sure that's happened then, obviously.
Hundreds of times. Hundreds.
They won't talk to you anywhere outside of the gym.
No, right. They get right in your face.
Yeah.
Where they set some foul. Here's an 80-year-old man that was pouring down rain in public. Saw him. He wanted to put my groceries and my bike with bungee cords in his little, I think he had a Toyota.
Yeah. Did he?
Yeah. And I said, no, I'm fine. I do it all the time. He goes, I don't do your way. Getting rained on because of that 80-year-old man.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. That was unexpected. And even risk scratching on. It's like putting my bike in your car and you don't get to our house. So he wanted to do it.
Yeah, people aren't like that anymore.
No
fucking chance. Hang on.
I always called him, by the way.
Oh, you were here when we spoke to him
I love it.
a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, well, man. He's old. Hey, I'd take 82. What is he, 82? He's gotta be older than that now. I'd take it. Mid-80s? I'd take that. He told me right now, I'd take 86. It depends on the cost of life, though.
Hey, if you're not doing GH and tests, and you're doing good at 82, that's doing good.
Yeah.
Now, for guys like us, following accident or other wrongdoing, you should have lived in 90 and 100 until we jack up.
Oh, it's not. The minute somebody's gonna change my diaper cleanly, I want to be dead.
Well, get off your test and start on a vegan diet. That'll have to do anything if you make it that old. Your brain is here.
Fucking vegan. That's such shit.
Oh my God.
Well, if that's what you like, whatever.
Well, if you like that, depriving your brain of certain nutrients that it needs to function off of.
Well, unless they supplement it with vitamins.
It's not as good as food. There's still things in food science hasn't discovered yet.
Either way, when it takes time whether you're vegan or not. I don't know whether there's any proof of being a vegan will kill you sooner or later. I don't know. With these headphones on, I can actually hear the water going down Lenny's throat. He's got this gallon jug. He wants that's what beer's piss sounds like going down his throat.
That was happy, warm, and tasty. Didn't have that pungent smell either.
But anyway, veganism is like fucking cool. Anyway, I don't care if you're like, I don't give a shit if people are vegan. Just don't try to push that shit on me.
I don't give a shit if they're fucking heroin using fentanyl using cookie cutter creep. Just don't get fucking my tax money. That's all I'm seem to be doing.
Who are the rehabbers?
Oh yeah.
The guys?
Who's paying for it?
Well, the insurance pays for it now.
You're so smart. They raise it and raise it everybody else.
Oh, the corrupt world we live in, Leonard. No humanity.
Yeah.
1%. 1%. I'm looking for a segue and a transition to the main topic of the last few days. I'm sure everybody's been probably listening to this and waiting for us to talk about. What do we think of the whole? Oh my God!
The guy should have done what Andrew said to do a couple weeks ago.
I've got such mixed feelings even talking about this shit with Joe or Rob and Johnny and here's what I don't really get. We had Rob on the podcast a couple of months ago, right? And we had a bunch of questions that we asked him. And he was very agreeable, and he was in a good mood. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but if my memory serves me correctly, didn't you ask him, are you autistic or do you have any mental problems?
If he suffers from any mental disability.
Alright, so he didn't get triggered when you asked him that. He didn't lose his shit. He actually took the question in stride. He laughed, we had a good time with it. So why, when Johnny asked him that question during the live stream, did he
has some
get so triggered?
bug up his ass for whatever reason.
And Johnny warned him. He said, I'm going to ask you some questions you might not like. This is what I do when I interview people.
Yeah, he was fine with it. So if you're fine with it, what? I mean, and the guy just lost his shit. He just snapped. And he must need one of those shots that Jason gets every month, the Haldol shot, that antipsychotic. And because the man, he's either borderline personality disorder, schizophrenic, or, he's definitely unstable. I mean, you don't behave like that at that age. Like, what are you doing?
Handle it. What the fuck are you doing? With a phone call. Hey, Johnny, I didn't like that question you asked me. I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that again. Okay, I'm sorry.
Or take down that live stream.
That's it.
Shit, don't share that live stream.
Right.
It's almost like he's, I don't know, I don't get it, man. It's very odd. But, he didn't know what he was getting himself into. We definitely know that.
Does anyone who unwittingly finds himself in this saga know it's to get himself into
Oh,
it?
man, bullshit, though. It's ridiculous that, these people that just come out of nowhere want to collab or do shit. But don't you, if you're gonna collab with somebody, any one of us, aren't you gonna do your research on it? Aren't you gonna watch a couple of their videos just to kind of see what they're about, or do a little bit of research before you just jump into some shit? I don't know. What do you think, Leonard? I think he's a cookie cutter. I think he needs to, like Christine used to say, grow up. Grow up, Araya, on this end. Or no, it's Andrew Ford. Grow up. Rob, grow up. Not something I would say, but something Christina would say. So that's from Christine. I'll speak on her behalf. Rob. But even still, even if you're not even, getting involved with Jason or us or whoever, if you're going to be on social media, you got to have a little bit thicker skin, man. You're going to get fucking criticized, no matter what. No matter how nice of a person are you, no matter how cookie cutter, transparent, however you are, if you're like the most, whatever the standard is, you're going to get negative fucking comments and feedback. That's the way it is, man. Like, how can you let that shit bother you? When you don't know any of these people that are making those fucking comments.
Even if it does bother him or anyone who's on social media, you can't let the trolls know it bothers you.
Right.
Don't broadcast your disdain for the trolling that you're receiving, because then they're just going to do it even more.
Exactly.
They're going to know they're getting you.
Rob, I take it when you came to this country and you entered the Michigan public school system.
Was he born here? I don't know.
He might have been.
I don't know what.
I hate to see it done poorly, but I don't know if you handle it the right way.
I don't know what is or isn't true with.
Yeah, he's totally full of shit.
Me knowing the Rock, please.
I never heard of it. How's that? And who cares if you do know him? What's the fucking? And if you did know him, why wouldn't you have a picture of him with you somewhere? Like, get the fuck out.
Well, anytime he's ever been asked that question, he just half
dancing around. He's full of shit. Like, just admit you're lying, But he's another Jason. He's a pathological fucking liar. But Jason's not even as bad as him, though. He's just lashing out and being such a fucking lunatic. He's schizophrenic. Naturally. Multiple personality disorder, too. Whatever the fuck. Ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous. Well, you want to go and you get mad when you get trolled, but then you want to fucking give out the people at Lifetime Fitness information, name names,
figures, give out numbers and shit, they get to where you don't think there's gonna be some backlash. I'm not telling you to do anything to them, but he's for information.
What the fuck is that?
Come on.
Everybody sees right through that shit, man.
You can't do
You're
that.
gonna troll, you're gonna get fucking trolled.
You know? Go fuck yourself. Go crawl back under the rock you fucking came out from under.
Yeah, that's your
Get out
rock.
of here. Yeah.
You know the rock. Well, the rock you crawled under, you cookie cutter.
Go crawl back under there.
Thanks for the shirt, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Enough of him. I can't stand that fucking guy.
Holy shit, bud.
God, he's a fucking douchebag. It's entertaining though.
I just need a little correction.
His journey is now complete in the Genovaverse. Now go away. He came, he got pissed on. Now, the smartest thing you can do, delete your YouTube, delete your Instagram, change your phone number, take a nice 2-week vacation in the Cayman Islands or go down to Aruba. Shit, I have friends down there.
Compulsory vaccination, which I had not heard that used in that sense before, which means if you refuse a mandatory vaccine and you are considered a risk to public health, you could be compulsorily vaccinated. So what does that really mean? Does that really mean if this whole COVID-19 vaccine comes to market and you choose to refuse, I mean, they can literally hold you down and know what you believe and compulsorily vaccinate you? I've not heard that term before, and I find that somewhere between frightening and disturbing and frightening.
It is beyond, and we have seen one of the World Health Organization officials stating clearly that they believe it's time to start entering people's homes because the virus is spreading in people's homes because everyone's on lockdown.
That ability not only to isolate cases, but to rapidly detect illness in the context and remove those contacts should be sick, is a central part of that. And as he said, they're using apps now to do that. They're testing apps. But they didn't do it with apps in Singapore. They did that with community workers, with public health workers, visiting the houses, checking on people, checking their health status every day and saying, how are you? Have you got a fever? Have you got a cough? And if a contact has developed a cough or a fever, they were taken immediately to testing. So yes, we need the information technology tools to help. They're not the solution. There is, right now, we don't have an alternative to what we would have considered in the old days boot leather epidemiology. Public health practitioners, doctors, nurses, community workers working with communities to detect cases at community level. And the most likely person to become a case is someone who's been a significant contact of another case. And at the moment, in most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the street and pushed back into family units. And now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
This is beginning to get very, very serious, very, very real, because they're openly talking about this. We had seen in the UK, not only are they talking about making vaccines compulsory already, which I've covered in a report previously, but also they're talking about not only censoring but possibly jailing who they deem to be anti-vaxxers. There's a provision in the law to where previously there would be a loophole to where people, if they genuinely believed the information they were sharing, which was deemed to be misinformation, they were under no legal obligation or anything like that. But now they're saying, knowingly or not, we want to possibly throw you in jail if you share an article from Dr. Terry Kenton, the head anti-vaxxer. This is getting to be very, very scary.
Well, it is because, if they start saying things like that in America, think about all the censorship that's already happened here. I mean, between all the social media things, like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, like now they're going through and they're just like keywording anything and just ripping things down from YouTube. And that's just not America. It's not anywhere else in the world. And so to me, it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes on how much traction these games, number one, and number two, how they have nothing to stand on but air. I mean, we've had multiple different times that we've tried to set up debates with them.
I mean, we did that one conversation event, it was like 2 years ago now, that was supposed to be, I don't know if you're familiar with what they were doing in Atlanta. There's all the kind of anti-vax groups, me and Bobby Kennedy and Del Bigtree and James Lyons and Tony Barr, so it was like 9 of us. And they had invited like 9 very pro-vaccine researchers from Emory, all sorts of places. And it was going to be a very controlled, very well, high-level debate. We were going to get questions in advance. We were going to have time to prepare our statement. It was going to be moderated by a local television radio person that was highly respected. We were going to be given each of us a certain number of minutes, and it was going to be kind of a point-counterpoint. There was going to be no gotcha, no any of that. It was just going to be very, like, let's set on the stage and put it out there, and then let the people decide. And 2 weeks before we were supposed to have this event, everybody on the pro-vaccine side decided they just didn't show up. And they said, and they got lots of people from their employers, because the standard argument is, if we engage in a debate, then that means there is something debatable. And as far as we are concerned, the science is done. They are tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. They are anti-science. It's all on our side. We're right. Vaccines are safe and effective, and they keep you from getting sick, and they're very necessary, and they cause no harm. They do nothing with autism or anything else. So if we get on the stage with them, then basically we are saying that there is something here of value to debate. And so what ended up happening is we had the chairs sitting on the stage up there, and we just said didn't show up on their side. And we just had the entire time to just talk as much as we wanted and tell everybody that was listening what our side of the thing was. And the guy who's the moderator, it was a black gentleman, very high level, and he said, he said, I don't know anything about vaccines. They just chose me to do this because I'm a local celebrity. He said, but after listening to you guys talk for the last 2.5 hours, he said, man, I'm never doing that flu shot thing. I learned a whole lot that I didn't even know about. So they need to, and listen, if you were a pro-vaccine zealot, and you think that I'm just the biggest quack that ever existed, and I was absolutely anti-science and had no idea what I was talking about, wouldn't you just love to take the opportunity on a stage, in a public forum that's being televised, and going all over everywhere, to put the heel of your boot right on the back of the neck of Terrence Company, the barriers to the stage, verbally speaking, just rip every single thing that she or Tony Barr or James Lyons or any of the Bob Sears, any of the rest of us that were on the stage, wouldn't you just love to publicly humiliate them and take them down right in front of everybody? So, and since they don't do that, what that tells you, and we've had multiple of those try to cut up, and every single time they don't show up. The only time was way back, I think this was in about 2009, I flew down to Texas, and Dawn Richardson, who's head of Prove, and now she runs the NBIC Advocacy Portal, and Dawn and I have been friends forever. And she and I actually did debate a guy from the Public Health Department there locally in Austin. And again, it was a moderated thing, equal time, and we were all standing around kind of milling around before we had this debate. And I walked up to him and I said his name, but I remember I shook his hand and I thanked him for coming, and I said, we don't really usually do this. He goes, yeah, I do this short script. And I said, why do you think that people don't do this very often? He went, it never goes well for us. And that was his response, and it didn't go well for them at all.
Well, that's, this is not a debate that they want to have. They want to silence us. That when they have conferences all of the time, just discussing how are they going to stop the anti-vaxxers, how are they going to convince people to take the shot. I mean, that's what they're talking about. They spend the majority of their time talking about this rather than, than what they're concerned about the next outbreak or if the safety even. They're not even sitting there talking about the safety. They're talking about how do we silence the anti-vaxxers. It's not a discussion that they want.
Vaccine hesitant. That's their new term now. Vaccine hesitant.
That's right. It is vaccine hesitancy and how to combat it. And if you think if they had science on their side and they had that perfect opportunity to just drive the nail in the coffin and silence the anti-vaxxers with science that they claim to have on their side. I mean, the whole thing, this is not a debate they want to have. They just want to authoritarian and just science based.
I will get to your question, but let me just start. First of all, I've heard since I've come in that increasingly people are using safety concerns or side effects as a vaccine hesitancy. And frankly, the work we do at Gavi is focused in the developing world, and we didn't used to have a lot of problems with vaccine hesitancy because, frankly, people saw the diseases every day. People saw people dying in their family, in their community. They saw the side effects. Of course, now, with the incredible success in vaccination, they're beginning to see less disease, and so, in a sense, the disease that we're talking about here can spread to them as well. And we have to think of it as a disease. This is a disease. The Secretary has already talked about how measles is so effective. This spreads at the speed of light, literally. For me, one other point I'd say is that we talked a lot on the panel about social media. We talked a lot about trying to stop the bad messaging. The issue is going to be not only trying to stop those bad messages, but to have positive messages. And it can't just be government, because some places governments aren't trusted. So how is civil society, how are societal leaders, how can we get a drumbeat of positive information that is there and not drowned out by the vaccine misinformation that's so critical? So in my discussions with social media leaders, that's my request. And to be quite specific, is to go ahead and try to stop the misinformation, take it off the air. I remind people that this kills people. It's like other misinformation, this actually has a real cost. It's not a freedom of speech issue. This is wrong information that's killing people. And then, how can they help us be part of the solution and not just part of the problem?
Now, Dr. Kenton, as a medical doctor and as an expert many times over, as you pointed out, what has been your experience watching this entire coronavirus situation unfold? The way the World Health Organization has handled it, the White House response, all the way down to local and state governments and around the world.
Well, there's a couple parts to that. When it very first started happening, so I'm going to say this was around maybe the second week in March. When they really when this really started building up and all of the hype and everything. I mean, I pulled up and went to the CDC website and I started researching coronaviruses. And I said, what's cool about this? I mean, there's 36 known coronaviruses. 7 of them can cause illness and healing. 4 of the 7 are very common, and that in any given annual flu season, influenza by definition needs to be caused by an influenza virus. So if it's not caused by influenza virus, the other 85% of illness that's out there, which is only 15% of illness any given year, of flu illness is actually caused by influenza viruses. So 85% is caused by something else, and they call it an influenza-like illness. Of that 85% of illness, almost 40% of it, on an annualized basis, is caused by a coronavirus. So I'm like, this is just a flu virus. I mean, what's happening? I mean, what is the big deal about this? And then as it went a little bit deeper, and I started seeing what they were talking about with shutdowns and this and that, and keeping people inside. I've been telling people from nearly the beginning of this that this has nothing to do with this virus. And just watch, mark my words, that in a few weeks, they're going to start crunching the numbers. Anybody with a phone these days is a citizen journalist. We're going to see lots of lies that are going to be coming out from this. This is economic warfare. This is going after Trump, doing anything they can to crash the economy, to do whatever they need to do about derailing our next election. So we have to send in ballots to do something electronically, like nothing can go wrong there. I mean, look what happened in Iowa. The one time that they tried it, and it didn't really work. This is about economic warfare, probably at some level that's way above my pay grade of what's going on with China and the U.S. and Russia and who knows what else is kind of going on. But it was never about the virus. Never. And I still believe it's not about the virus. I mean, when you've got 80 to 86% of people who actually contract the quote coronavirus illness completely recover or aren't even sick enough to go to the doctor. We've got empty hospital beds. We're laying off doctors and nurses. We're shutting down global economies. We're decimating entire industries like airlines and the cruise industry and the travel industry and hotel industry, the restaurant industry, I need a haircut, right? And so, we're decimating the industry. Over what? And with social isolation, and when they started using the term social distancing, the first time I heard it, I was in my office with my family, sitting in the back room having lunch, and I said, do you guys see the psyop that's going on with just that phrase? The psychological social distancing? They didn't sick, they should stay home. And number two, if people are coughing, you should probably maintain a safe distance. No, it's social distancing that's now part of our language lexicon and maybe part of our society for a long time. And wearing these masks and gloves while they're, I put up a meme the other day and it said, the U.S. government taxed everything. And it had a gal with a black mask and black gloves like this. I said, who's tracking the robbery? Because, we don't have facial recognition, we don't have fingerprints, and we're letting all these people out of jail. Who's tracking the robbery, So as I watched it infuriates me. I am so glad that finally it was like a tsunami. Everybody was like, and now people are going, and they're getting mad. I'm glad. And they're saying, screw you, I'm going back to work. I am not going to let the U.S. government and my governor, who's never written a paycheck for employees probably in his entire life, and laid off families and is about to make people homeless, I'm not going to let the government take away my house, repossess my car, ruin my credit score that I worked so hard to build, make me default on my credit cards for a big fat nothing burger virus. I can't believe that more people aren't responding and saying, no, I'm done. I'm going back to work.
I think it's getting to that point. We are beginning to see more and more people start to resist the lockdowns. More and more people are starting to just go and open up their businesses. I know people that have saying, screw it, I've had enough. We're opening up for business. And that's a form of civil disobedience. And as you correctly pointed out, they're literally releasing criminals from jail. Some of which are sexual offenders. Very dangerous. Yes, very dangerous.
They let out like 22 murderers out of jail the other day. Convicted murderers.
Unbelievable. But at the same time, they're threatening imprisonment of just regular people who are not criminals, who just want to work, who want to live their lives.
And in New Jersey, they're not using drones on the streets. They fly over to make sure that to buy their product. And so, I'll give you all the money to create it, and if nobody else wants it, we'll buy it. Would you like that for your business? I'd love that for my business, right? And so because of that, but the pharmaceutical industry was not happy with that. They said that's not good enough. To have all the money's not good enough. We want to have the same level of protection for the bioterrorism vaccines that are going to be fast-tracked and no clinical trials, as with the 1986 vaccine. It took them a couple of years, but then finally, it was on December 17th of 2005 at 11:30 p.m. at night. Bill Frist, who was on the Senate, a Republican, Bill Frist, Republican Tennessee senator, walked over to the House after everybody in the House had gone home and had signed off on the 2006 Defense Appropriations Bill. He handed the Speaker a 40-page bill and said, this will get tacked on the back of this Defense Appropriations Bill, and we'll call it Division E. Nobody read it, nobody voted on it. It just got shuffled in on the backside of the Defense Appropriation Bill. And what that actually does, I want to actually read this to you because it's that important, and this is probably my main message that I've been trying to get out to people with all these interviews and stuff that I've been doing in the last couple of weeks, is that what the PrEP Act does is it goes far beyond what the Injury Compensation Act of 1996 did. And after they got that passed, what the PrEP Act actually does is that they get complete immunity for all drugs, all vaccines, all biological products labeled a covered countermeasure, which can also be a technology or a software. If it's actually developed underneath the PrEP Act, when the PrEP Act is activated, which is the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. It's all biologics. Anything that's called a covered countermeasure that's being created during this public health emergency about COVID-19. It has immunity from all accountability, no matter what they did wrong. If they had a dirty plant facility and it put all these contaminants in it and people got sick, no liability. Complete liability for anything that's declared under this covered countermeasure. And immunity from all lawsuits, all of that. So if you get injured under the Injury Compensation Act, you can file in the Federal Court of Claims and vaccine court for compensation. Only about 25% of people actually get compensated, but at least you have an opportunity. Under this, you would have to, if a bunch of people got hurt or a bunch of people died from this COVID vaccine, which, by the way, there are 119 currently in development. good candidate. But everybody's bellying up to the bar to get that free money, right? And what you would have to do, the families of the injured party, either the injured party or the family of the dead party, would have to go together and take that information to the U.S. Attorney General and prove that the company performed an act of willful misconduct, that they intentionally created this product intentionally to harm you. And if you could prove that, then you could get compensation for your injury. Oh, except for that little pot of money is currently unfunded. There's no money in it. So Congress would have to retroactively put a bunch of money into the pot to be able to compensate injured parties, which they probably, and that's only if the U.S. Attorney General decided to move forward with enforcement action. There was one lawsuit that came out of this during the swine flu era, so it was in 2009. They tried to prove it. There was no money in the pot. They said, well, your only recourse is to go back to the Attorney General and prove willful misconduct. Now, the other thing that this cutback does, it allows them to fast track anything. It puts them under all of this liability. It puts them under complete protection. They can fast track anything. They don't have to do animal studies. They don't have to do, even they do small human studies. Let's say they do 1,000 people, but maybe the death rate is 1 in 10,000. They're not going to see. They're not going to see the signal until it gets massively put out there. And guess what? We are currently under that act because February the 4th, Alex Azar, our HHS director, declared a public health emergency, and it goes into play on the day that they did, and on March the 17th, it was registered in the Federal Register, so now it's official, and it will be official indefinitely until President Trump, whoever finally decides that we no longer have a global emergency, which looks like it will be when 100% of the population is vaccinated.
Unbelievable.
And this is where Bill Gates gets his idea about, he says that he wants to have all liability protection for the Gates Foundation and for all of these other organizations like DARPA and all the vaccine manufacturers. The idea comes from our law that was passed in 2005. And I'm telling you, other than Googling the PrEP Act here, it's not much out there that you can find. And I happen to know people that work at the NSA who said they didn't even know about it. They didn't even know about the PrEP Act. And they're wanting now to take this like globally.
So this is unbelievable. They have total immunity. They have all of the endless funding. They can do whatever they want. There's no checks and balances in place. There's no repercussions. There's no accountability. They're just, it's just the blank check of all blank checks at this point right now. And, we keep hearing about this deadly second wave that's coming, presumably around the flu season or the end of the year, or maybe when this new...
Right before the election, man. It'll happen right before the election. I mean, that's when we'll see this. Right somewhere, October-ish, let's say it's fall, flu season, and now they've created a template that anytime they want to, turn that thing and shake everybody's bell because everybody's so afraid, they can do it. Oh, this is going to be the worst flu season ever. You guys better, go home and put on your mask and gloves, right?
Well, and they say that every flu season, but, okay, now speaking of this blank check of immunity and funding and everything, and they're rushing, openly admitting and boasting, they're proud of the fact that this is the most rushed into development vaccination ever. It's a brand new type of vaccine, experimental, never been used in humans before. But we see people like Bill Gates who often champions the polio vaccine and credits immunization with the eradication of polio. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a major problem with the polio vaccine. Could you tell the viewers about that?
Well, that would have been the Cutter instrument that you were talking about. So they were kind of fast-tracking the polio vaccine at that point in time, too, because it was coming into summer, and they felt like every summer they would have these outbreaks of polio. And it's interesting, Spiro, that even today, if you say the word polio to young people, your age, or even younger than you, when you say polio, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Run. No. The first thing I think of is this story that you're about to tell us. The SV40 virus is what pops into my head.
Okay, so most people would say paralysis, iron lung, kids with braces, right? So that was in the 1950s. 70 years later, people are still saying that. So we've got this multi-generational indoctrination into the belief system that the polio viruses actually cause paralysis. no symptoms. Or they get something that looks like the stomach flu. That's it. 97%. But yet the only thing we think of is iron lung and which is the precursor to today's modern ventilator, right? We think about that. But what the two things that sort of happen, one is the SV40, like she said, and the other is the cutter incident. That they were fast-tracking these vaccines, and a lot of people are saying they were not safe. Like what Salk was doing on a small, in the laboratory, didn't translate to large vats of viruses. It just wasn't working, and they weren't able to figure out a way to like attenuate these viruses, and it was going to be a big problem. And so what ended up happening is Cutter, the manufacturing Cutter, and the other one named Wyatt, actually put vaccines out that had live virus in it. And thousands of kids actually contracted paralysis from the vaccine. And it was all happening in the chiropractic clinic where they were seeing these kids that were declining, they were coming in right after the vaccine, and they had paralysis. But they covered all that up and they changed the criteria and made the rules be different on diagnosis just so they could hide it. And the other thing that came up, they found out later, was a researcher by the name of Betty Eddy that works as a high-level researcher at the NIH. What she was doing is she was taking as they were developed, because she was really concerned that they were fast-tracking this vaccine. It was the first vaccine they were ever going to do on this particular virus, and we were going to be injecting this into children. And so she was really concerned about this. So she took some of the serum that they had grown the virus in and started injecting it into experimental mice and rats. And every place that she injected the serum, they all grew tumors, all of them. And she went to her boss at the time, who was the head of the NIH, and said, we need a moratorium on this. We need to stop this until we figure this out. She got silenced, the rat got shut down, and all of her funding went away, which happens to whistleblowers in that sector at almost every single time. And what they found out later, much later, was that that original polio vaccine had simian viruses in it. That was simian virus 40, because there was a whole bunch of them, but one was the source. And Dr. Michael Carbone actually was the one from Loyola, actually had gotten some original vaccine and they started testing it and said yes. And these simian viruses, which are totally benign in monkeys, but in humans, they cause slow-growing types of cancers, mesothelioma, sarcomas, solid tumor, brain tumors, things like that. So he was like saying, listen, the government, at the very least, there's nothing we can do to go and vaccinate those people. You need to know about this and set up a study to take care of them. Well, his lab got shut down and his funding got taken away. And if anybody wants to read the whole story on that, there's a book, it's called The Virus and the Vaccine by Debbie Buxton and Jim Schumacher. It was published, I think, I'm going to guess around 2011 maybe? Maybe a little bit, no, it's before that. Maybe 2005, which maybe been a while. It took them 9 years to do the research to write this book. It's extremely well documented. It reads like a suspense thriller. It's actually a really good book. And the first half of the book is about the development of the polio vaccine. And the second half is Dr. Michael Carbone's story about what he found and what he tried to do and how he got all shut down and everything by the government. And so these stories happen over and over and over again. I mean, anytime you find a problem with a vaccine, you're shut down, you're gated, you can't even talk about it. I mean, look at how they scrubbed all this stuff off of Facebook and YouTube and MailChimp and, all of those sorts of things, Pinterest, any sort of things off of that. Because, like we said a little bit ago, they don't want the truth about their shoddy, crappy, shady product that if they didn't have this liability protection would never, ever sell to anybody in the open market, ever. So it's just a horrible product. He has a really, really good friend. He's retired now, but he's still really close friend, who is the president and CEO of a Fortune 200 company. And he said, oh man, Terry, what I wouldn't give to have complete liability protection for every single one of the products that we make. Wouldn't you have to see the cat's meow? Because then you don't have to pay for insurance. There's no incentive to make a safer, better product. None. Why? Just keep people who cares. Stop doing business.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a completely upside down, backward system. We know that the medical mafia is a very powerful group. The lobbies that exist and the amount of money that line the pockets. This is a real big problem, especially now being faced with the potential of mandated vaccines, possibly that there's no liability. There's like you said, zero incentive to supply a safe product. They're rushing it through. It's never been done before. I was reading that typically it would take 15 to 20 years, possibly?
At least 5.
At least 5 years.
But the shortest, fastest is to market is usually 5 years.
And that contaminated polio vaccine that you were discussing, that was given to, they estimate, nearly 100 million people, possibly 98 million people, and this is according to the NIH, their own website. So I mean, this is some real concerning information that people need to be aware of, because, you know, I mean, we have been indoctrinated, as you pointed out earlier, that if someone's wearing that white coat, that we're supposed to just blindly accept everything, you know, just take the pills, the medication, the shots, whatever, you know, and not even think twice about it. I definitely appreciate you having the courage to step up and to speak out like you have been for so long, and because it's not safe, you know, there has been a lot of questionable, you know, things that have happened in the past to people who have tried to stand up and speak out against those things. I know you're very busy, Dr.
No, there's a couple of things I want to say about that. One is vaccines have never been proven to be safe ever. They've never been tested against residual placebo. When we say safe and effective, the general population of people who hear the word effective equate that to mean it keeps you from getting sick. But I can tell you that being effective just means you get an antibody, a marker of contamination, and you can have very high antibody levels and still get sick. So I want people to know that effective is not a synonym for protection. It's just not. And kids, and a lot of times people that are older, they go, what's the big deal about vaccines? Like my age or older, you know? I don't remember kids getting that many vaccines. That's right. They did, like up to 1985, there were only 3. And now, depending on how you count them, children get multiple doses of 17 vaccines and 72 doses of vaccines by the time they graduate from high school, which have never been tested for synergistic toxicity, never been tested for carcinogenicity, whether they cause cancer or not, never been tested to see if they cause mutagenicity, which is transformation of their genes, never been tested for teratogenicity, which means birth defects, and never tested for whether or not any of them can cause infertility somewhere down the road. And now with all of the aluminum, they're now getting up to kids, if they get fully vaccinated, around 12,000 micrograms of aluminum that are injected. And all the little boys now that are getting Gardasil, all the 500 micrograms of aluminum in each one of those shots. And we're now seeing that the infertility rates are going up in little boys. The sperm count is dropping. And Chris Esper, who's one of the biggest researchers of aluminum, like in the world, you know, he did a study that was really important. Because they took 62 male volunteers, and they all donated a semen sample. And they tested and the higher the concentration of aluminum in the semen sample, the lower the number of sperm, and the lower the motility rate. And some of them had aluminum that was like so high that they have a zero sperm count. And so we're seeing, you know, the whole global depopulation agenda, I believe, is alive and well. Not only Bill Gates even said that vaccines do so much.
Negotiate with terrorists. Once you start bending to the average cookie cutter porch monkey piece of human filth, everyone and their brother is going to line up and do the same thing.
It's just a publicity stunt. Yeah. It's damage control and a publicity stunt.
Yeah, I would say if I was a corporate head, I would say that's an isolated incident. These employees are getting going through another orientation, or they're be terminated.
Well, for those who don't live in the United States and are listening to this, there was an incident. Where did this happen again? I don't know.
I heard something about it.
Boston? I'm not sure where it was. There was a Starbucks here, and there were 2 black men in the Starbucks, and they had been there for a while, but I don't think they had bought anything. They were waiting for a third person to come to have a business meeting, and the manager of the Starbucks asked me to leave because the manager claimed they were loiterers. They hadn't bought anything. And I think they wouldn't leave. They said, we're waiting for somebody to come. We're going to have a business meeting. So the Starbucks manager called the police. And there's a video of it. Go on YouTube and look it up. Of them, the friend eventually showed up and filmed them being arrested. And they were held in jail, I think,
Well, if you have a private business, you have the right to tell people this. When I didn't leave the Point Beach Mall, they told me they could kick me out whenever I wanted. You have the right to do that. It's a private property.
Well, if you're not buying anything, you should leave.
But the company, the business has the right to tell you to bar entry to anyone.
But don't a lot of people go to Starbucks and just set up a laptop and do work and all that crap?
Easy, buy a coffee or something. Yeah, but you should have at least, buy something.
Yeah, you gotta.
That's what I used to do. I used to buy fucking crap and I like to use it at home, but I don't have to do it anymore because I got my phones actually Andrew Clora's wisdom. But if you don't like a black person, you should be able to tell them, we don't serve you. It's my business. That's simple.
Well, you know, there are now, I think, a wall
I
of...
don't want your dog in here. I don't want you.
But for them to close for the whole day, I mean, I don't care, because I don't go to fucking Starbucks anyway. Garbage, overpriced garbage. Here's the opposite situation. In New York, a judge just ruled that a bar is allowed to throw a person out of their bar if they're wearing a Make America Great Again hat.
I saw that.
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah. Or if you're a Trump supporter and you're wearing a Make America Great Again hat, and you're a bar owner in New York, a judge said that's legal.
I agree with him. You could refuse service to anyone.
You're
Who
right.
get hurt? It hurts you.
You're right.
How about this? There's a story from 1992 when I was picking up black street hookers in Delray. There was a place, a girl, a hooker named Vanessa. She goes, I know this guy, he's $10 an hour and we can get a room. So we went there and the guy's sitting there, you know, older black guy, probably in his 70s.
You mean in the guy's house?
With his, yeah, he had a knock on his front door and it was like a hotel all around the house. And he was in there playing cards with his buddy. And he saw me. He looked and he said to me, he goes, I don't like the idea. I ain't gonna let a white guy in here. Because you attract too much attention, no police coming here. And she says, come on, man. I know this guy, whatever. He goes, I don't like it, man. I don't like the idea. So, you know, he goes, I'll do it this time because, but I don't like it. And she paid him to, you know, what was I going to do? Go and complain about it? But the funny thing was, in my zest to get rid of that tan in that room, I lost my keys in the car. And when I came, I realized I saw him in the ignition. And I was telling the guy, can you call the cops? Like, open my door. He's like, no, I ain't calling no cops, man, because you want them keys, you better break that window. I ain't getting no cops there. And then, of course, she begged him and pleaded with him again. You know, she was really cute. Her name was Vanessa. He's hard to find. So he called the cops. He brought the Slim Jim. And he asked, what are you doing there anyway? I was just fine. Like, whatever. But was I to complain about that? Because I don't like the white guys.
That's so funny. He didn't want to draw attention to the police, and then he had
But you should have a right to refuse anybody.
I say they need to refuse these people that bring their fucking dogs everywhere. I can't fucking stand. I can't stand
That guy bringing the dog to the gym.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You're that much of an emotional fucking wreck that you need to bring your dogs every day.
Oh, yeah, because he gives me unconditional love.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's allergic to your fucking dog and you're sitting right there, I don't care if the dog's behaved or what. The thing is, with Photoshop, you can easily make your own certificate now declaring your dog a service pet. I have a friend who does that. And most places won't even ask. Yeah, you just walk in with your dog and they automatically think it's a service dog. No, I want to see a fucking legitimate paper saying that that's a service dog.
That's not a legitimate paper. You're right. Get that dog out of here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Don't give me that shit. You're trampling on other people's rights. Yeah. And a business owner, again, should refuse that at his volition. Stop infringing on other people's rights.
Lenny, I have a question for you. Maybe a week ago, Andrew Colora posted a video on Instagram, and he told a story that we have to have you elaborate on the 600-pound toilet breaker.
Oh, yes.
Do tell.
Well, Andrew was the security guard at Office Depot, I would say late 90s, and he went to build trains together, and he said, this lady broke a toilet again. He goes, apparently she's broken them many times, half a dozen times or more. 600-pound black woman. So she's on the toilet, and all of a sudden, the thing will totally collapse under the weight to where she's sitting flat on her ass, bleeding sometimes with broken pieces of porcelain, shit, piss, whatever. And she's screaming and yelling for help. And some of the security guards got to get 5 or 6 of them and pick her ass up, or I think one time they had to call the paramedics. And they didn't fire for that. She didn't lose an ounce of weight.
What do you mean, she worked there?
She was an employee there. He said her son would pick her up in one of those old,
throw her in the back of a pickup.
Yeah, one of those porch monkey jalopies, like a big old Chevy or
They have a fucking regular car.
Right, he said being fat, she could, crawl, move in, it's more flexible because it's nothing but fat. Shift herself and stuff her into this. I think her son helped her.
Oh my!
The car went down all the way. We're almost dragging the back bumper's dragging on the road. Pick her up. She had no qualms about it. You know, it was like they had to do that. Pick her fat ass off the ground. And then not once did they tell her, oh, maybe you need to lose some weight or you can't work here or this and that. No, her fat ass keeps breaking toilets over and over. And that was okay.
How good of a worker can a 600-pound person?
That's what I'm saying.
What did she do there? What was her job?
Maybe secretary work, I'm not sure. But it's, yeah, so obviously she wasn't doing any type of moving around. But they had to pick her fat ass up.
Fucking gross.
Bleeding.
How embarrassing, too. Like,
It didn't seem to matter. It was like, you know, whatever.
Like you got no shame either. I'm surprised you don't break toilets. How big you are. You ever broken a toilet?
I broke a sink trying to get off the toilet.
I remember you told me.
Yeah. But it, well, you know, when I was 450, I was trouble wiping my ass, so I'd have to shit and then run in the shower and wash down like that. It's getting pretty rough. But of course, I was 450 of solid muscle. You know, this fat person was
solid.
My back was like a fucking brick wall.
I saw that video of you guys doing that, Andrew doing the max bench. You were fucking
Oh shit, that was hard as a rock.
You were big, but you had that fat on you.
I had some water retention, some fat there. I was holding a hell of a lot of muscle, I'm sure. And I was a freak.
You're fat, you're talking about fat like cellulite fat.
Mushy, gushy, killer fat.
They actually have a fucking reality show about that. Facts about people that are that obese. That don't leave their house. They're like my 600-pound life.
Well, I told you about
what the fuck, man?
I don't know if I told you
I'm gonna pull it right in your head.
About the woman that was, they had to cut her part of her house open down in Lake Worth down the road, and they took her to JFK. She was stuck in a couch. She was shitting into the couch. And people were bringing her food, and the couch was stuck to her ass. And she would just literally shit into it. And they had the fire department had to break the wall down, take her in. They had to cut this couch off her ass. Could you imagine? About the worst case ever.
How many calories does a person have to consume and then not burn to get
I think the key is not burning, not moving.
I mean,
again, she didn't even get up off the couch.
You must be sitting there watching.
People are bringing them food, bringing them.
No. You want food to get
bringing them to them.
You're enablers. You're idiots.
Right. Enablers.
Instead of bringing them food, bring them a fucking bullet. I mean, you know, you might as well. You're killing them anyway. Just fucking shoot them in the head. Get it over with.
Yeah.
How could you let yourself get that big? I don't know. How the fuck, man?
Enable it.
You know how you gain a little weight, you feel it. You know, you don't eat as much for a few days and you lose it, or you don't drink it, whatever. But to get to that point where you're like past the point of no return, like you see it some people, like damn it. You know, you see with some women, if they lost 30 pounds, they'd be fucking, you know, they look good. But they just don't, they just can't.
It's actually pretty simple.
It is simple, but that's called self-control, willpower, whatever the fuck. It's mind over matter. You don't have to eat that box of fucking donuts. Why? You know what I'm saying? Like, how hard is that? No, I know that's, you know, gonna make me fat. Unless you want to be fat. You know? And if you're not exercising, you can't be eating like that. It's so simple. These people, like I said, they get past the point of no return, and then it's just, once you're 100 pounds overweight, it's like, very hard to get back. Where's he going?
I just drank it down.
Yeah. This is for Brad or Andrew. Brad, on one of your live feeds, you were asked, what would you be doing if you could do anything you wanted, career-wise? Same question for me. I would have gone to medical school if I can turn back the clock and do everything all over again. My father's father went. My father went, and I did not follow in his footsteps, and I regret it very much. That's what I would have done. I would have become a pathologist. I don't know, man. That's a good question. I didn't know how to answer it on the live feed either. I really don't. I don't know. I wasn't. It's a no-brainer for me. Matter of fact, after I got my BA, it's like a fucking. Oh, Lenny, you're gonna get prostate cancer. You're urinating. You better sit down. You might get prostate cancer. It's like a cow pissing on a flat rock. Where the fuck did Hamburg? Hamburg, I love you, but some people confirm that, and they message me, oh, it's true, it's true. Oh, it's not. Where do they do that fucking study? have done differently, or what if I could do a career change. I mean, now I get, you know, I like what I do. It's not paid well, you get good benefits, you know, but if I didn't have kids, I think I'd go to California and grow pot. Wendy, can you feel the prostate cancer growing inside you?
No, it's just I'm craving water. I'm growing. When you're sluggish and you're stiff, you're growing. And you grow when you're sleeping. My body is just wanting to grow.
How many hours a day do you sleep?
Sometimes 6, sometimes 9, depends. Days of work, probably 6 or 7.
6 and 9, is that a Freudian slip?
Yeah. I remember the last time I did it, in a traditional 69.
I think I can remember the last time you did it. Well, not traditional, but I can, all I have to do is go on Pornhub and I can see the last time you did it. Let's not go down that road. This haircut's not real. His hair and stuff. Yeah, I sleep like 5 or 6 hours. I wish I could sleep more. I probably could. I could put myself to bed earlier. Sleep when you're dead. Yeah, exactly.
That's what Arnold said.
But even when I have a day off, man, it's 5 o'clock. My fucking body, I just get up and I get to do shit. I'll go back to sleep, but it takes a few minutes.
Your girl toss and turn?
No. Just simple. No issue there. You should have a king size bed.
That's a Freudian
You got
slip.
plenty of room.
When you're there, you know there's nothing to sleep.
Lenny, this is a good thing for you, idiot. Do you want a tough question, Lenny?
There's no tough questions.
Alright, then here we go. Myron Ryan, can you ask Lenny why he kisses people's ass in person, then the minute they turn their backs, he talks shit about them?
You just draw pleasure in it. I like knowing that I can perk people up. Good diplomatic skills. By the way, hats off to Donald Trump for ending the Korean War.
Wasn't Bernie Sanders saying he's going to start a nuclear war with Korea? Right.
From what I understand, they communicated to Kim Jong-un and said, hey, what do you want to do? You could be a hero to the people in the world. We'll help you out a little bit. Or do you want to become a parking lot? He goes, think about it.
I think Kim Jong-un realized that he's crazier than him. And they couldn't fuck with this one. Yeah. Sanctions work. There you go.
No, he's helping them out. He talks to sense. The farther he sends them to him. And remember, Kim Jong-un is very paranoid. People have to get him over there. So,
just like Big Rob.
But what do the North Koreans ever do to the United States?
They're cutting his wires.
Well, what did we do to them?
We came to the defense of South Korea back in the 50s. We never did anything to them.
You never did anything to North Korea?
See, when you don't communicate, a lot of mistrust goes on. Once you sit down and be diplomatic, you know, although that didn't work with Hitler, he had guys come over, wine and dine him, Neville Chamberlain, sign a peace treaty, and a month later declare war.
What's the next question? I don't want to be talking about Hitler anymore. What's going to be fucking banned from my camp?
He's already gotten too much good publicity from this podcast alone.
Yeah, he had the right idea of wiping out a race, just not the right one.
Oh, I saw a shirt coming from Instagram. Pol Pot, Ho Chi Minh, Hitler, Stalin, Idi Amin, Fidel Castro said they all believed in gun control.
Gun control will never work. You can't because what are you going to do?
Doesn't work for the average man.
What are you going to do?
The average citizen.
You can't get rid of all the guns. And if you do the buyback or you're trying to get rid of all of them, then who's going to have the bad guys? And then the good guys can't defend themselves. Who the fuck is the... I mean, come on. There's really no solution to that shit.
All the buyback does is people sell their guns that don't work. They're defective.
It's never going to end.
No.
I mean, you just hope that the next mass shooting, because there's going to be another one, you hope somebody's there that has a concealed weapon that will actually fire it and fucking, stop. Well, there was one in Parkland, but the coward cop didn't use his gun.
Went in the head.
I think they need to be people, if you're going to go, they should do stricter background checks. I don't think they need still buy a gun. But that's like cross between Superman and Punisher. Like,
What do you think about that comic book for Watchmen?
Some people didn't like it, but it wasn't a bad movie.
I liked it. I had to watch it like 5 times before I really understood it, and then I kind of really liked it better, you know?
It sort of reminds me of that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It wasn't bad.
I love that, because I love Sean Connery, but, you know, may he rest in peace.
Then you watch that, what's that other TV show on at the moment where, they're in that, house and that guy's got that big muscle suit on, he's got skinny legs, but he's got a big upper body. There's something, is it something Academy? It's called something Academy. It's almost similar to the X-Men where they're looking at this Academy house and this monkey tries to run, he's like a professor, and this guy's got these huge arms and shit.
Really? I gotta watch it. Yeah, I think it's on Netflix.
Umbrella. I think it's called Umbrella. Umbrella Academy. Have a look at it.
Alright, last question. What's Lee's favorite food, both healthy and unhealthy?
I don't have one. I get asked so many questions all the time. What's your favorite? There's too many good foods. I couldn't name one. Like, what's your favorite movie? There's too many good movies, from horror to action to comedy to porn to whatever. But when it comes to food, I could say steak, but then I love hamburgers just as much. But then I love Chinese just as much. And then I love McDonald's just as much. So if I was going to have a last meal, I was on death row. And I had to pick a last meal. I'd probably be on death row for another 20 years because I wouldn't be able to decide. So I'd be sitting there for another 20 years on a ticket. Have you ever wondered this? This is what I wonder when people are on death row. It's like, you're going to be put to death row, okay? So like when people come in to see you, even the chaplain, when he comes in to see you to, have a prayer or whatever, why don't they just get him and strangle the fuck out of him or rip his throat out and murder him?
I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. You want to know why? Because at that point, no matter how fucking crazy the person was, they're all saying, you know what? I'm dying. Maybe there is a God. Maybe I should try to redeem myself the last moment before I'm dead, just in case when I get over there, I might be judged in some sense,
No, but then the thing is though, if you kill him, you've got to go through another whole trial. It's the law, so you don't get put on death row.
I don't know, maybe that's the way out of it. I think junk food wise, the ideal junk food, like I like ice cream and stuff, but I think that and I was talking about this with Romano earlier, the cannoli might be the perfect junk food. Like the perfect blend, a good cannoli, man.
It's like that tube of like a waffle thing with the
the crust and the cream inside. It's everything. It's a light your taste buds on fire.
Sounds like you're describing your night with Steve Black.
I knew this was sometimes involved.
Anything around with the cream filling.
And I hate to say my healthy choice of meal might be, I think I have to go with sushi. I know you like sushi too, but I really love a great sushi roll. There's nothing better than that. Really? Even though it's not unhealthy for you.
I can't understand why body sort of selling this whole sushi thing, because they put up these plates. Look how many plates of sushi I ate, and it was so expensive. And it's like little bits of fucking rice with a little bit of fish or whatever. I'm like, big deal. That's like fucking gay food. Nothing against gay people, but that's like, I've watched fucking Rainbow. When Rainbow was in fucking Vietnam, they were hostage. They gave him fucking sushi, little bits of rice.
Well, I've only go to like sushi buffets or you can eat places because I think it's overpriced. But I tell you this, I have a good friend, I'm not going to mention it. He took me to a sushi restaurant in Manhattan. And I'm telling you, the rolls were tiny. The pieces were tiny. Literally, it was a sliver of fish. It was the greatest taste yet. They were like melting in your mouth. On a piece of rice. And they were, it had to be like $5 per piece. I'm telling you, it was so expensive. The meal had to be in the thousands. And I wasn't even that full when I left, but it was the best sushi I ever had. Are you,
I couldn't take it anymore. The thought of the sushi was turning me on.
I thought you liked the meat better than the sushi. That's what I was told. It's like too black. You said you like the raw meat.
You said you had a good friend.
tell you one thing right now. No good friend would take you to a fucking sushi. You'll get taken to Morton. Real friends take you to Morton Steakhouse.
You know, back in the day, you ever had these, well, you definitely did. So a lot of gay guys want to take you out to dinner. Nothing phony. Oh, I just want to take you out to dinner, expensive steakhouse, you can bring your girlfriend. They just want to hang out with you kind of thing.
The only one that took me out to expensive steakhouses was, remember Ruth's Chris Steakhouse?
Yeah.
The big silver platter they bring around and all do it.
I love Ruth's.
Ed Connors used to take me there.
Yeah, I guarantee, I know for a fact, who's the guy you used to hang out with in Austin, Texas? He used to take you out to dinner, right?
No, not.
No? Mark didn't go to dinner with you?
Yeah, but he was my manager.
No, I know, but I'm saying he's like a guy who likes to hang out with all the bodybuilders. And he would always go, I know a lot of people who are friends with him.
Yeah, but we were trained and stuff, but we never like fancy dinner, it was just a normal whatever, but Ed Connors would take me to a nice steak.
Yeah. Well, Clutchman's like that too, but I had never been to like a Morton. I didn't know what Morton was. I was probably 22 years old. And this guy said, take your girlfriend, come out, and why don't you got a good career, one of those whole shit. And we went to Morton. I drove into Morton Steakhouse in Manhattan, and I couldn't believe, I never been to a fancy steakhouse. It was great. I totally enjoyed it, but,
did they let you in with your tank top on, or did they say you were underdressed?
I think he liked it. I think the guy was very happy that I had a tank top on. I think I had a shirt over, like an open shirt over, but yeah. He liked the tank showing, the text showing.
When you go to those places, I used to think even like Ed never did like that Ed tried something. Ed never tried.
No, Ed's like one of my best friends. I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I always used to hate people say, I think Ed would have too much to lose. What he does in his private life, I can care less.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I always think when they take you out to a place like that, and they other like gay people in that place, and then they see someone like him come in with these younger, tough guys, they go, oh, look what he's got tonight, and stuff like that. It's like almost like if you take your girlfriend up and you're showing her off, this beautiful girl up there, they're bringing you to like whoever that mate was that took you to that fucking steak.
Yeah, he was proud.
He's Big Dave. What was his name that took you there? Dave or Michael? I don't know. John took you to Morton. He was Big Dave. And John had gay friends sitting around and they're like, oh, Jesus. John's not going to be walking straight tomorrow. Fucking hell. Once that guy gets done with John, they're probably calling John up the next day. Okay, you guy you brought in. Are you still alive?
Good old
I think there's a lot. When I watched your show the other day, like a Christmas Peter, yes, you're talking about your back and then you put up that cushion you sit on. That still made me think of that guy at the fighting house that used to sit on that donut with his kangaroo. As soon as I saw you put that up, I just went,
That's what happens to get old, you gotta sit on cushions.
I watched your stretching,
Everyone's asking me to do a stretching video. They want to know how to stretch.
Now, everyone's asking me that our shows should go longer because I sometimes sit there. I love watching all your shows, the ones with John and Funny.
You're a very loyal watcher.
But then sometimes I sit there and watch you and Chris talk and you just talk shit. Yeah. It's like this. What do you want? Let me just look at something here. Hold on, Chris, I'm just pulling it up now. Yep. That's right. He's wearing the red shirt.
You know what the problem is? When I'm looking something up and you're talking, and you're giving, Chris doesn't get the clue. Dave's looking something up. Start talking so that people enjoy Dave and they hear what you're talking about. He'll just he won't say anything. And I'm like, I gotta try to fill that air. I'm like, Chris, can you talk about something while I'm looking at the picture we're looking for?
Let's pretend. You pretend you're doing something, looking something up on that page.
Alright, hold on. Remember, you're entitled to nothing in this world. That's Chris, it's right.
He does.
Yeah, you really can.
He does look good though, yes, but, with the real estate market and stuff like that, Let me see the picture again, guys. Lee Creed is GoFundMe. What's he got to say now? What's Lee talking about now? What's Lee talking about? And he really said that? No, the Joker.
Yeah, you can take some shots at your GoFundMe. How is your GoFundMe going anyway? What are you up to?
I haven't even looked for over a month.
How close to leave GoFundMe campaign? Let's see what he's up to.
It's probably around 4,000 or...
Probably hasn't moved because we're not pushing it enough. Are you serious about getting the surgery?
Hey, tomorrow at 9:30 I have an appointment. I'm seeing the neurosurgeon tomorrow morning.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yes. I'll let
But I
you know
thought the
how it goes.
surgery you're getting is out of the country.
Well, the surgery I can get here, before the stem cell and that
okay.
Let me just see that picture again, Dave, how you just hit the show.
$4,600. You're not working hard enough to raise this thing up a little bit.
Let me just see how you figure out that show, Dave. Yes, well, you know.
Alright, so what if the surgeon says to you, Lee, I looked at all your films and everything, I can fix this thing. I think that we can get you back to 98% of what you were. Are you doing the surgery? Yes or no?
Well, Dave, would Lee Creed really do that? Didn't you look at him again this last show? Yeah, he's getting up there, Dave, you know. He's getting up there. I gotta sell some real estate, move to Florida, maybe, Dave. I'll come up down, but, you know. Would I, yes, I would say yes, on the aspect that if it all went well and I went back to training and this muscle atrophy I've got, you know, like, that disappeared. They say you got muscle memory, but I'm thinking I could have this new disease called spinalopia. What it is like my muscle memory has Alzheimer's and it's like a muscle won't come back. It's a new muscle wasting called the Biden effect. The muscle doesn't remember. So if it all came back and I trained and dieted down and, you know, I'm always a realist. So if I looked in the mirror and said, okay, I'm in the condition I was at the universe, but a bit fuller, or even that condition, yes I would, but if I was anything less, I wouldn't go on stage.
Okay, well, that's reasonable. I feel the same way. I would make the same assumption. You don't want to look worse.
Yeah, because you go, what can you imagine? Everyone will be like, yeah, Lee's coming back. Oh, and they introduce you, walk out and say, crowd going crazy,
Well, now that Flex Lewis didn't compete, you guys are like kind of on the injury, disabled list, both of you. Maybe you guys can make the comeback at the same time next year.
I think we could do a couple. Why not? Anything's possible.
Maybe someone can take you guys out to dinner and you guys can discuss it at Morton Steakhouse or Ruth's Chris Steakhouse together, and then maybe come up with a good coaching team together. You know.
I saw was it Neil who mentioned it, or somebody else? Neil was talking about very quickly the interview with Sean Ray and asking why do people hate him or something.
Yeah,
that was. I didn't watch the interview. I'll have to watch it.
I'm sure watch. Sean got major thanks.
Dave Wood should have just said, you're fired.
I thought he was going to say that. It almost sounded like Donald Trump, you know, on the apprentice thing. That's it. You're fired.
I'll have to watch it. Wasn't you talking to Chris about that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was on the Digital Muscle YouTube channel. Jake, Sean Ray interviewing Jake, but really it was Jake representing Sean.
You need to have a look at that, Dave. Yes, he does look better at this show. I must say, James does look better. I got Chris down, haven't I?
You got everyone down. You're a very good mimicker, I gotta tell you, you know.
Yeah, but I'll have to have a look at it before we get. I heard that when you asked him why do people hate you, he just went off on a tangent, didn't really.
He said something about COVID and I don't know. But I mean, what do you think?
I don't want to. I don't want to.
Right?
I don't want to demonetize the show, but so when people hate the show, you're like,
I think Sean enjoys being hated by people because I think it gives him more, like, he feels like, you know, he incites more emotion, you know, when
it's not like he's got a choice, so that's what he's saying.
Alright, well, we're going to wrap this thing up. I got other stuff to do, and I know you got to get to the gym, and remember, you're not entitled to anything, guys, so if you don't like the show, too fucking bad.
Entitled to nothing.
And if
actually, they did like the Batman show.
Look, in the comments, people can say which
superhero they'd like to see Lee dressed up as next, and maybe Lee will take it into consideration, and if he's assuming he has a costume, which he probably does, he will appear as that. I'd like to see a Superman costume come out of the mothball.
I got like an old, like a Christopher Reeve one over there, and I got a Spider-Man one. Hold on, I'll do this quick one for people. Hold on.
So I killed him, so I killed the dead alien, so I just wanted to kind of have
Alright, guys. Alright, guys.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, hello, guys. How are you? I'm Christopher Reeve. How are you? Some people like to see invisible men, so there I am. Hello. Oh, I'm so witty sometimes.
I actually like it. Did you watch the Invisible Man movie with, what's his name, the one from Footloose, Kevin Bacon?
Can you look at that again, guys?
Remember the Invisible Man from the one Kevin Bacon was in?
Oh, I mean, yeah.
That was a good one, actually.
Actually, did you see the last Invisible Man, the remake one?
No. Who was in that?
The main lady from Handmaid's Tale. And then the actor, I can't remember.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Pretty good though. The actual shooting had it was almost like a superhero suit, and then it just changed and went like invisible and stuff. So.
Well, you know what's really good now? You can actually, with green suit, so you can literally put on a green suit, and if you're on a green suit,
falls under the United Nations is the only way to ensure that they can control information in order to combat fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. That means news reports like this one, which counter the official story, warning that a deadly virus could potentially escape a level 4 biolab in Wuhan, China, and cause an outbreak is possible. And wouldn't you know it, another coincidence. Huh. Yeah, the city of Wuhan, China is the same city where this level 4 biolab is located and appears to be ground zero of this real-world coronavirus outbreak. And currently millions of people are under quarantine as this virus is reportedly spread to more than 10 countries. Now I urge everyone to please take all this information in with a grain of salt from every source, whether it's this channel or from your sold-out corporate media. Please do your own research. I do not have any vested interest. This channel is not monetized, so I do not profit financially or in any way here. I do this on my own time. I have a busy life, but this is my passion, and this is what I do. Now, like any good detective, one must always ask, who stands to gain from this? Is this all just a coincidence, or is there something else going on? Now, sadly, channels like mine and many others probably will not be around for too much longer, so please be sure to follow me on alternative sites like BitChute, where I post all my videos. I'm also on Twitter, for how long is anybody's guess, so I set up an account on Gab. Now, both BitChute and Gab both pride themselves on not censoring content. You can also find my work at achievepost.com. Please share this report far and wide. For now, I will leave you with another couple clips from this pandemic simulation. I'm Cyril. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.
I do think that there needs to be sort of an honest broker, a centralized command and control organization that really brings together the public-private sector, both on a global approach and also on a local approach.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. And I wanted to speak to the point about having the honest broker. And I think in this regard, the United Nations fits the bill.
I think a complementary tactic too is to tap faith-based organizations and civil society and other institutions to recruit them also to basically, almost at a grassroots level, continue to basically have the integrity of the information.
It's important that UN and WHO remain very clear, but when they challenge governments directly, they often get into this issue of sovereignty. And so I think it's really important not to have that as the only response. I think it's really critical to think about soft power influence.
As important background for this discussion, we want to start the meeting by dealing with things that are just on global news network.
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreak. There are now more than 30,000 reported cases. Experts warn this may be just the beginning of a global problem. CNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about cats, the virus, the outbreak, and the resulting case.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreak in recent years. Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza. Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods in some megacities in South America. CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems. The fatality rate is about 10%. For comparison, CAPS is about as lethal as SARS, and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 1918 influenza pandemic, the worst pandemic on record. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in the hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at the destination symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities could respond and contain them. In other places, physicians have quickly recognized the symptoms of CAPS and have been able to isolate infected individuals and avoid an outbreak, for now. Global public health experts are very concerned about this disease. Because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person, essentially all people are susceptible. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere. Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Given the global population is 4 times larger than it was in 1918, if these models prove accurate, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of deaths over the next year or 2. The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic. 65 million people died in the first 18 months. The outbreak was small at first and initially seemed controllable, but then it started spreading in densely crowded and impoverished neighborhoods of megacities. From that point on, the spread of the disease was explosive. Within 6 months, cases were occurring in nearly every country. The global economy was in a free fall. GDP down 11%. Stock markets around the world plummeted between 20 and 40% and headed into a downward cycle of fear and low expectations. Businesses were not borrowing, banks were not lending, everyone was just hoping to hunker down and weather the storm. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impact, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer.
The line between disinformation and misinformation is not always an easy one to find.
Government seems to be willing to do things that are out of their historical perspective, or for the most part, it's really a war footing that we need to be on.
It can happen quickly. A Marshall-type plan, something that doesn't say that exactly, but a Marshall plan, they can go into effect and stimulate a change very quickly.
The distrust relates to the health system more generally. A step up from the part of the government on enforcement actions against fake news.
I think a couple of things we have to consider are, even before this began, the anti-vaccine movement was very strong, and this is something specifically through social media that spread.
Welcome to Event 201. it will prioritize who should get tested. You get the message about masks to be a kind of bipartisan, let's protect other people type message, and then you engage in the complex discussion about which things it's beneficial to reopen, like perhaps kids under 15, whereas schools for older kids in communities with lots of infections, sadly, you probably aren't going to be able to do in person.
Now, James, it's interesting to see that straight out of the gate, Bill Gates defends Dr. Tony Fauci. What is your response to seeing this video of Bill Gates' response, and what do you think the world would actually be like if Bill Gates were president of the United States?
Well, it's such an interesting question. It's a revealing question, not because I think the response is self-interesting. I mean, he says everything that we would expect him to say there, including, trust all of the science and listen to Fauci and all of that. What is interesting about it is the implicit assumptions that are embedded in that question, as if he were president, then Bill Gates would have power. But because he's not president, he was tested on the sidelines and waving his hand, which is, of course, the exact opposite of reality. Because if he was president and he was up there lecturing the public, okay, everyone has to wear their mask and listen to testing, then just by default, just because he would pick one of the two flavors, Coke or Pepsi, you can only be two flavors, so he has to be one of them. So just by the act of choosing one of the two, the other half of the population would be against whatever he says by default. And who knows, maybe even some people within his own team would not like what he said, so they'd be against him as well. Instantly, you'd have some sort of kickback against what you're saying. But no, Bill Gates is a benevolent billionaire philanthropist who loves everyone and just wants the best for you and your family's health, so he can sit there on the sideline and give billions and billions of dollars away, just give his fortune away to help you and your friends by creating entire institutional frameworks that will ultimately be the bodies that partner up with Big Pharma in order to basically increase his own investments in the vaccine industry. I mean, it's on its face, it's ridiculous, but it's because it has been embedded in our brains since we were children that only the president has the power to govern the country, which is the exact opposite of this reality. And so it says a lot that that question is even on the table. And I'll throw it back to one of the Gates family's mentors, David Rockefeller. Maybe an apocryphal, I don't know if there's a source on this quotation, but it's often said that when David Rockefeller was asked, Mr. Rockefeller, why don't you become president? He responded, I don't want to take a demotion. Now, again, I don't know if that's a true quotation, but it certainly is the truth. David Rockefeller did not want a demotion by becoming president of the United States. That's a chump game. That's the political puppets that we throw out to the public so you can fight over them like a dog chewing on his toy. I don't want to be part of that. I'm the guy behind the scenes who's funding the institutional frameworks that create the reality you are living in. And that is exactly what Bill Gates is doing right now. So if he was president, it would actually probably be better for us, because at least half of the population would be guaranteed to be against everything he was saying. But we don't live in that reality. We live in a reality where he's floating on the clouds as a philanthropist, and that is absolutely too identical.
Well said, James, and that was essentially my takeaway from it as well. Bill Gates, he's already basically declared the most powerful man in medicine worldwide. And this is Politico saying this, that he's the most powerful doctor in the world, and he's not even a doctor. So it's just mind-boggling there. Now, James, I want to go back to the very beginning of the outbreak. I know some people will say that the source of the virus is irrelevant. It's the agenda behind it that should have the focus of our attention. And I would agree with that to a large extent, but, in the sense of any proper investigation, this is certainly a part that needs to be looked at, studied, and analyzed. Now, others would say that there is no virus and, whatever. I mean, nobody really knows, I think, at this point. But what we do know is that the official story is garbage as usual. the virus came from bats too, right? Now, some believe that the virus may have leaked from the level 4 bioweapons lab located right there in Wuhan, China. But what nobody seems to ever want to talk about is that on the exact same day of Event 201, the pandemic simulation, of course, of the global coronavirus outbreak, which was hosted by Johns Hopkins in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum, the world's military games were holding their opening ceremony in the exact same day, right before the coronavirus outbreak. 10,000 military athletes, not including the support personnel from 110 different nations around the world, all in Wuhan, China, which we are all led to believe is ground zero of this outbreak. What are the chances of all of this, and what is your take on this in general?
Well, let's look at the generation-defining black ops of the past century, like, for example, JFK or 9/11. In operations like that, if there's anything that we've learned over the years, it's that there's going to be 18 different cookie-crumb trails embedded in these stories, so that there's something crazy over here that'll capture your attention, there's something crazy over there that'll capture your attention that never will be resolved, because it's all in the past now, and there's no way to prove anything, so people will fight, and ultimately, entire warring, internecine classes of doctrine about JFK and 9/11 whatever arise, and you don't agree with what I think about this particular thing, so therefore you're... And I think if we've learned anything, it's that that's actually by design. Of course, if you do want a successful black ops to go ahead, you will have to implant a lot of crazy trails and stories and these things, and things that seem to connect in weird ways, and what the hell is that about? Mysteries embedded in there that, of course, are fascinating and will attract the conspiracy theorists, the realists, who actually want to look into what happened. I think we're going to have to assume that that is what is happening with regards to this. So yes, I mean, there are all sorts of crazy things like Event 201, like the Wuhan Games, like that bizarre whatever was happening around Fort Detrick last year with the outbreak of the... And then there was the vaping thing they were trying to blame it on, but it was there were clusters of these pneumonia-like illnesses that were happening, and I mean, there's so many different things that we could look at, and again, yes, I don't have the definitive, here is exactly what happened, and I don't think anyone will ever come to that at this point unless we get the signed, sealed, delivered confession from, one of the insiders of the plot. Unlikely. But what we do know, and what we can absolutely prove, is all of that institutional framework, all of the preparation, all of the planning that for decades that has gone into this very scenario, the pandemic outbreak scenario, most obviously announced by the front man for this agenda right now, Bill Gates, back in 2015 when he started doing the media rounds, warning about the next pandemic and all of this. And he was such an incredible foresight. He knows what's going to happen before it happens. And now he's warning about pandemic too, so we better all be prepared for that. Well, we better be. It's probably not going to be a natural phenomenon. So, having said all of that, again, I don't have the smoking gun on that, but I do, and I have seen and laid out all of that framework, the preparation, the planning for the institution of medical martial law, which we're starting to get introduced to bit by bit. And of course, it's not going to all legal out at once. That would be extremely ineffective and people would revolt against it. But it's a little bit at a time. It's indoctrinating people into the system, which is why I think the mass debate that is happening right now in the United States, specifically, because I'm in Japan, people here wear masks every political reason, and it's not a big deal here, but it is a big political deal in the United States right now, and I think it is part of the indoctrination that's getting the public used to the idea, okay, here's an invasive, or not exactly invasive, but at least a noticeable medical sort of thing that you have to comply with. It is a compliance test, essentially, which is part of that, that's going to be an escalation that will lead to mandatory vaccination at some point down the road, and I think they're preparing the public for that. So that kind of framework and that preparation has been laid, and I talked about this 12 years ago in a podcast I did on medical martial law, which I updated this year when this all started rolling out, where I go through all of the types of planning and the documentation and the Model State Emergency Health Preparedness Act that was created back around 9/11 and that was rolled out in state after state, that has basically brought us to this point. That I can point to and I can say, look, clearly, whether spontaneous, maybe it really did come from bats too, it doesn't actually matter insofar as the way that they've responded to it, and exactly what they've been busting at. There's So I think, at some point, obviously, the decision was made, okay, this is the one we're going to use, we're going to jump on this, let's go for it. But whether or not that was designed, whether it was case, whether it was completely natural, I don't know.
Well, it's only a match, James. It's only a match, right? That's how it all begins at this point. And, going back to March, early to mid-March, it was reported that the day before the World Health Organization declared a global health pandemic due to the coronavirus, the Gates Foundation donated a large sum of money, something like $100 million to the World Health Organization. Well, what is the significance and what are the implications of the World Health Organization declaring a global pandemic? In other words, what kind of doors should that open up?
Well, we can look back to the previous scare, the swine flu scare, where people might not remember anymore, but it was, oh my god, this is the end of the world, this could kill us all at that time. And I remember personally here, for example, in Japan, teaching in the public school system, and we had entire schools closed down because a couple of kids came down with the sniffles. Oh, we're all going to die, we'll close down the whole school. It was craziness there for a while, and part of that was talking about the vaccines and the vaccination for this. And, there's been many scandals that I suppose do come out, even in mainstream CBS news, but as John Rappaport and others have reported, well, yeah, that was reported in mainstream sources that, oh, by the way, in fact, most of the people who were deemed positive for swine flu probably never had it at all, and they quietly admitted that a month later, but sweep that on the rug. And, also it turned out to be less deadly than a regular flu season, all of that. But one of the interesting things that happened during that, and one of the things I covered at the time, in the few articles about it over the years, was the WHO's response in declaring that swine flu whatever the official title was, pandemic of international concern, or whatever fancy title they gave it, the specific legal title that it needed in order to essentially necessitate the buying of all these vaccine doses from these pharmaceutical companies. There were a number of signatories to the World Health Organization who had essentially some sort of formal deal where when an international health event or whatever is officially declared, we will purchase such and such from such and such companies. So it was the World Health Organization that essentially flipped that switch and necessitated the buying of all these billions of doses of vaccine, which ultimately didn't end up being needed. And as it turned out, lo and behold, as even the European Council eventually admitted, a lot of the people on the board, the advisory board that made that legal decision to declare it an international health event, were on the board of the vaccine manufacturers themselves, were financially tied to the big pharma industry that was benefiting from that declaration. That was, or should have been, a huge scandal. It was admitted, it was brought out in the open. As I say, even the European Council and others were talking about it, but it obviously didn't get the sort of mainstream coverage that put it into the public consciousness. So people don't remember that happened, but that's exactly what happened. Similarly, of course, when you declare an international health emergency, pandemic, global spreading pandemic, not only do those types of contracts get kicked off, but then also you start to flip these things like the Public State Health Emergency Act, which has been passed in some of the states in the United States, for example, that allow governments to take certain medical martial law steps and things like that. So there are real legal ramifications to these types of declarations. And who gets to decide that? And what are their financial ties? And what does it mean that something like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is, by the way, also a foundation trust, which is invested in pharmaceutical manufacturers and others, that has financial ties to what happens here, what does it mean that they're donating hundreds of millions of dollars to the World Health Organization, the second biggest donator to the World Health Organization, right behind the United States, which, if they actually do withdraw their funding next year, as they're threatening to do, would make the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation the biggest contributor to the World Health Organization. That is something. That is a very, very big conflict of interest that, to be fair, was almost kind of broached in a recent interview with Bill Gates. The interviewer actually did press a little bit, saying, well, are you invested in some of the companies that will benefit from these vaccines? And of course, he completely danced around that question. But could you imagine a world in which a press actually held its feet to the fire on that issue? Because that would start to tease out some of the implications of what you're talking about there. For example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation being one of the largest contributors to the World Health Organization.
Absolutely, and not only that, great point, by the way, James, there. Lots of cause for concern there, but, it also, it triggers, like, for example, the rollback regulations, the Operation Warp Speed. I mean, it changes the game completely, and it's just unbelievable to see, and, the way you eloquently put it, I mean, how can you not see that there are major conflicts of interest taking place right here? And it's certainly apparent to me that I don't really think that they care about the public's well-being at this point. Now, speaking of Trump possibly pulling out of the World Health Organization, a lot of people think that this is a done deal already, just because he made the announcement here and there. It's not, as you point out. But simultaneously, actually even before President Trump announced that he was threatening to pull out of the WHO, full funding, he was funding Gavi, endorsing Gavi. I mean, this is, what's your take on that? I mean, this is a global vaccination campaign that the White House, that Donald Trump's administration is funding, I would assume, with taxpayer money.
Right. This goes back to what I think we started this conversation with, which is the idea that it is the president who is deciding and runs the show, which I think at this point, if you still believe that Trump versus Biden is the central deciding issue for the future course of the world, then there's no hope for you. You will never wake up. Because if anything has been exposed in an event like this, it is that the politicians are puppets. They are thrown out there to be the dog toys that the public chew on, and then they're discarded like used birdcage liner, and the new birdcage liner is put in. It doesn't matter if it's Biden or Trump or someone else entirely. The agenda will continue in exactly